Well, you've made it, folks. It's the end of the week, and to be more precise, it is the last George Show on 710 KNUS for this 2023. That's right. Tomorrow will be Saturday, then there's a Sunday, and then Monday we're not here celebrating 2024. This is it, folks. Today looks like it's going to be okay outside, about 52 degrees. I got outside a little bit with Grammy yesterday, threw the ball around a little. Saturday, it's going to be 53, and then Sunday we lose about 10 degrees, and then we kind of drop off another 7 or so by next Tuesday where it gets super cold. I, however, will be out of town for a couple of those days taking care of some stuff, but I fully intend to be back on Tuesday remotely, if need be. Otherwise, I'll be in person. That's when we're supposed to get flurries possible at 38 degrees. The news that Billy will get to later, probably better than the news I'm going to cover here. The two big things that took place yesterday. One, our interview with Lauren Boebert, which, by the way, wasn't unique other than that it was the first, I think, that morning. She ended up going on a couple other places and really getting the word out, and we've got sound that we can play that we'll talk about that. One of the things that folks that listened yesterday noticed was, hey, something happened at about 8:30 after the Boebert interview. People called in, people texted in, and they're like, this sounds eerily similar to part of the show from earlier in the show. And
it was a time slip. It was
time slip.
Yeah, it was a Doctor Who thing. It's a sad. We apologize. We had no control over it, but yeah, we had some things going on behind the scenes.
Yep.
That we needed to take care of technically.
Also me.
Yeah. You had some things, but also we had a real serious issue with Comcast and some other stuff. So we really had to do some stuff behind the scenes. Now, was that our number one choice of what we needed to broadcast at that time? No. But was that the choice we had to make at that time? Yes. Absolutely. Yeah. And it was the best possible choice. But that's it. I mean, sometimes, as we talk about, sometimes we put the plane together as we are in the air. And that was one of those moments.
When you say sometimes, you mean only when we're actually on the air.
Yeah, only when we're on the air. Yeah, other than that, we're totally planned and everything else. But yeah, so that was just choices we had to make yesterday, and it was the best of the situation that was there. And and understand that not everybody liked your rant earlier in the 7 o'clock hour, but I thought it was instructional and I thought it was very informative. And then I thought it was great, and really kind of looked at it. And then I really liked the fact that we, personally, we were able to run the Boebert interview twice. I think that was, of all the ineffectiveness and all of the decisions that were unfortunate we had to make yesterday just based on some challenges, the fact that we could replay the Boebert interview in its entirety, I think, was significant. I was really happy that we had that rather than just like, God forbid, we had a large section with me talking. That would be just awful. So
this topic will continue to work, at least for a conversation topic here. And I say that because of the response that we got from people in the text during and after the interview. There was a lot of sentiment. And, if I'm being fair, there was someone who said, hey, I'm all in favor. This is great. I agree with Lauren on this thing. By and large, almost every other text was no way. I can't believe she's doing this. She is a fighter. She should stay and fight. This is not fighting. And I asked some of those questions, and other people who are like, why didn't you crush her on blank? Or why did, and it's like, hang on. Listen, if my goal is to poach any person that I'm going to have on here, and it's a one and done, if that's my goal, I can do that. I can go full on prosecutor, cross-examine. It's probably why we won't get Dinesh D'Souza back on. But from that interview a while ago. But in this particular case, I don't see how that advances the ball even a little bit, right? Like, we got the answers we were going to get. You could continue to press and show either incredulity or confusion or some sort of, hey, I need further clarification. We were never going to get more information than that. The real issue now is, what did you hear?
Yeah.
Right?
And the other one is,
what do you think?
We're not going to submarine a guest. If we bring the guest on to talk about their change from the 3rd to the 4th, it's not appropriate for us to go, let's talk about that Mike Johnson vote. let's talk about why McCarthy's not the speaker.
Yeah.
If we have
or Beetlejuice or something like that. That's not the point of this.
It is not the appropriate time. Now, if we have an extended time, now we did. Lauren was wonderful with her time with us.
Yeah, she was.
But
She was great.
if we had set the ground rules as an extended conversation, then that's okay. That's something that we do with some of our guests, not all of them. Apologies, Joshua Sharf and Sherry Pife, but we always got dragged into stuff. But with other ones, like Chief Acevedo, he has a firearm, so we check with him first. As far as we don't say topics are out of bounds, but we say, is it okay if we do this, sir? Because things could go badly if you say. Yeah, so that's
I look to
that's
see
what
if he's popped the safety thing on the holster.
As soon as you hear that snap go, you're like,
But I think the other thing too is, look, the benefit of this show in many ways is we have access to people, right? We have access to Dave Williams and to Lauren and to Ken. And I imagine if I reached out to Doug Lamborn, I'd get Doug too, and all these other folks, even the mayor of Denver. There's a reason we get to do that. Some of that is interpersonal relationship building over years. The other part of it is, even if they don't like some of the questions, I don't want anybody ever to leave here feeling like they were treated unfairly. Or that the fix was in against them or something like that.
We're not going to submarine them. We've told people, especially Mayor Mike Johnston, that we are going to ask hard questions, but we aren't going to ask unfair, loaded questions.
Right.
We're not going to do so when did you stop beating your wife? We're not going to do those.
Because no one knows.
Yeah,
no,
exactly. But we
First
are.
off, First, anyone that knows Mike's wife, he's the one that's at risk.
Yes. She's a badass. And the other part of that is we can ask those fair questions and be honest about it. Say, are you going to meet your goal of putting 1,000 people, bringing them off the street by the end of the year? You asked that question of Mayor Johnston last time he was on. So we will ask those difficult questions. What we aren't going to do is ask those loaded, unfair questions that, to be fair, we hear on both sides of the aisle. You hear that a lot of times where the question contains the conclusion before it asks the question.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, and this is, again, I think that folks like Hank Schwanger won't come back on this show because they feel like they can't win. And that's okay. If your goal is to come here and somehow be able to just get a message out without any other questions, well, then we can't help you. But I don't ever want them to come on here because they think, oh, Brauchler's going to do something dirty or he's going to undercut me. I'd rather them just be like, I don't want to go there because dude's going to ask me hard questions I don't want to answer. Now, on the Lauren one, my gut feeling, my opinion here is this issue of, and it showed up in a lot of texts, carpetbagger, over and over again, carpetbagger.
Yeah.
That's a legitimate issue. It is not a winning issue. I mean, right now, someone asked me, so do you think that, she's going to win this thing? And I said, I do. Right now, I do. But as we've seen, a year is a long time in politics. It's an eternity in some ways. Anything can happen that can derail that thing. And so, a year ago, hell, 6 months ago, no one had ever heard of the Boebert Beetlejuice thing. She was running for the third and all that. And, Ken Buck was going to be serving for eternity. All of that was real 6 months ago. So people say, do you think she's going to win? I say, yes. Have the election today. Absolutely, she's going to win. Her name ID. You can't buy that kind of name ID with $3 million. Can't do it. Not in the current media market. That means, in my opinion, she wins. Does that mean that can't change? No, that could change. So, but if she's going to pull this off, I want to have her back on so that we can have conversations about this, that, and the other. I want her to feel like 710 is a place she can go to at least have a conversation and feel like she's not going to get, sucker punched or something like that. So anyway, but I do want to talk about that interview. There's no doubt about that. The other big thing that took place, of course, was the Maine Griswold, the Maine Secretary of State out there, who kept Donald Trump from being on the ballot. Well, and I think she delayed something. It's interesting. I started reading the opinion, Billy.
Yeah, what do you think?
Well, I'm not to all of her reasoning yet, but there's some stuff in here that is really interesting. And I'll give you an example.
I would bet.
There are 3 different plaintiffs, if you will, or complainants. One of them is and they're not all, hey, he should be kept off the ballot because of insurrection. One of them is an attorney. And the attorney said he should be kept off the ballot because he says he won in 2020. and you can only serve 2 terms as president.
Ooh, that's interesting. That is interesting.
You
I mean,
can't have
that is,
it's just the creativity of some of this stuff is crazy.
There are times for all of the rocks that I do, and I do throw rocks at lawyers, and I make fun of, off the air. We go back and forth a lot. For all of that, that is brilliant. That is one of the times in which I embrace lawyers because of that creative thinking. Do I think he's right? No. But I look at that and go, but that's interesting.
But he's like, I'll take you at your word.
Exactly.
We take you at your word.
Yes,
you did win twice. Now you can't run again.
And that is such an interesting conversation. That's the kind of conversation I enjoy, where it's you and your buddies, and you're sitting around, and maybe you got a few adult beverages, and you're just like, okay, let's just talk this. Just create a cone of silence around us, a bubble. Let's remove ourselves from reality, and let's just discuss this really crazy idea. This would be so much fun to talk about. Yeah.
And I haven't gotten through a ton of it yet. I'm about 25-30% through, but one of the things, and you and I talked about this off air, and I'll keep saying this until they cut us off on it, but sometimes the best conversations are the ones that don't take place on the radio, but also it's invaluable to have that ability to have that back and forth. But we were talking about due process. Well, in this particular case, one of the objections Trump makes before the hearing begins is, hang on, I've been denied due process. I haven't seen a single exhibit from this other side. And the judge writes in the opinion, that's true. There was a technological glitch where some Dropbox link didn't work. And so in hearing was the first time that the Trump attorneys got a chance to see the exhibits being used against him. And the judge still said, not a due process violation, because this particular Administrative Procedure Act thing, there's no requirement under it to have shared evidence before the administrative hearing. So here's where I'm thinking to myself, she's probably right on the law, but that's not what America's going to hear. Yeah. That's not what Trump people are going to hear. They're going to hear, are you kidding me? You kept him off the ballot with evidence that he was surprised with at a hearing? Because people just don't think in terms of the Administrative Procedures Act, and that's what applies here. And that gets right back to what you and I were talking about off air, Billy, before, was what's enough due process? Like, where are we? For this unique kind of a situation, is the due process different than if it would be for, are you 35 years old? Are you a natural born citizen?
And I find that fascinating. And again, it is that great bromide of the off-air conversation is far more fascinating than what we're going to do on the air. But and I'm trying to pick your mind because you understand this at a granular level that I don't.
I pretend to.
and sitting on the sidelines, the problem that I have, the circle that I'm trying to square, is the idea of Trump being denied due process in this procedure. And you make some excellent points, and I'll let you get to those in a second, because where I'm sitting, if he has legal representation, he has an opportunity to present a case, he has an opportunity to bring in information. For me, that's part of due process. But there are some other layers involved in this kind of procedure, which, if I was involved in it, yes, I would feel aggrieved if I was not allowed some of the other stuff with discovery and things that you've outlined. And can you help me understand and kind of walk through and explain some of my dumbassery as far as how I'm sitting on the sidelines and those of us that look at this and say, wait a minute, what about this claim of due process and what does it mean? What is it involved and how is it different in this procedure versus other procedures, and what's that claim about?
Yeah, this is probably the stuff that the Supreme Court's going to decide whether they want to weigh in on. Something else interesting I had not realized from this is his attorney in Maine was Scott Gessler.
Really?
Yes, dude has become the Trump national guy on this, and that factors into the judge's decision too, because the judge says, hang on, I don't think there's much of a violation here, none under the APA, but really under due process, because almost all of the evidence relied upon was evidence presented in Colorado with the exact same attorney that represented Mr. Trump in Colorado. That's an interesting pitch to make on this.
That is, because it's saying you've already presented all this stuff, that saying that you didn't get a chance to present it here becomes moot.
You didn't get a chance to review it. She's saying you're not surprised by it, dude. You already litigated this just a week ago or 2 weeks ago. That was interesting. And it makes me wonder, well, look, if you had brought in a different attorney, would the judge have said, okay, I get it, it's different? I don't think the outcome's different, but that's an interesting argument. And then the judge did something interesting by saying, listen, I'll give you 3 extra days after the hearing to file any objections to exhibits and stuff like that. For folks that look at law and order and think that's the kind of due process that applies in every case, they'd be pulling their hair out. It doesn't. That's not. You can't have a jury trial criminal setting for every single violation of an administrative code or law or anything like that. That'd be crazy. We'd shut down the country. But in this particular case, the optics are horrific, in my opinion, because it's like, no, we're going to present all the evidence against you. If you have concerns about them, I won't take up your objections during the hearing. I'll do it after the fact. In the civil world, some people would still probably scream bloody murder, but when it comes to Trump, you are feeding the narrative that the fix is in. And I think that the judges on the Supreme Court for Colorado, the judge in the case, Judge Wallace out in Denver, I think they've lost sight of that. And maybe there's good and there's bad to that. Maybe the good is they should just be focused on what they think is the fair application of the rules and the law. But they're feeding the beast, man. They're feeding the narrative that, oh my gosh, you donated money to Phil Weiser and Jenna Griswold into an organization that hates Republicans and thinks January 6th was an insurrection. How could you still be the judge? They've missed all the other stuff. That you know what I mean? Like, that's enough for them. Or, oh my God, you didn't give him a chance to call witnesses and subpoena witnesses or to do whatever. That's the only part that they'll fixate on. And so if the end result of this is just, hey, let's just apply the law and we'll let politics sort itself out, maybe. I worry about not paying attention to what the optics will do here. I don't think you bend your decision to it, but I do think it has to impact the way you present things and some of the way that you rule on stuff, because simply saying in here, the APA doesn't require you to have pretrial discovery of exhibits is like, okay, true, but Joe Q. Lunchpail's going to look at that and go, you're crooked. You know, it's a fix.
Yeah, and that is going to be the problem, and I like the insight you had there, that unfortunately where we are going in our dialogue is no longer about the procedure and things that are presented inside of the courtroom. It's everything else. It's the idea of, well, if I don't like what's happening to the person that I'm in favor of, it's obviously a crooked process. And then I can wipe away the process and I don't have to pay attention to what the judges, the ruling, or anything the court says, because I've already invalidated that entire process by just claiming that it is crooked. And we are going to see that on both sides of the aisle. Right now, it's growing on the right more than the left. The left has done a little bit of it, but that's what is going to be the flip of when the shoe is on the other foot. You're just going to have the liberals claiming, well, these are just conservative courts. They're obviously on the take, and
You're
how
right.
could they possibly? Yeah,
You and I've talked about that. They do that with the Supreme Court all the time.
It'll be Clarence Thomas. Clarence Thomas, you're going to hear the exact same stuff about Clarence Thomas. Absolutely from liberals.
Well, and we've already seen, we talked about this, the Post coming out and saying Kavanaugh and Gorsuch and Comey Barrett, like, they're all Trump appointees. And it's like, okay, you're doing the exact same thing.
Exactly.
Man. I mean,
the stuff that they complained about. They said how these judges obviously can be impartial because that's their role, but now they turn around and they put the jacket of a Trump appointee on them. And how many times on both sides of the conversation, and I hear this in the liberal media sphere and in the conservative media sphere, how many times we are discussing court cases that one of the first two facts that we talk about the judge is who appointed them. That now is de rigueur. That is now what we have to do, is we have to say, well, they were appointed by, as if that impacts their decision-making. I find that interesting because the idea being, and this is weird, is that one of the things Trump talked about was, well, those three are my judges. They are going to, and then we have conversations of that.
My judges,
yes, exactly. Those are my judges. I put them there. They should be grateful to me. They should be doing things for me because of what I did for them. We've had private conversations that have been revealed that go along that line. And that's where we're going. We're going along the line of assuming now that if you place someone into a position of power, they now owe you something. They now need to be deferential to your wishes. That's a little spooky, especially when we're talking about the courts. Because imagine,
especially when we're talking about the courts.
Imagine if it's talking about if here in Colorado we are definitely blue. So Polis or whatever blue governor we may get next time, would it be okay if they are specifically putting these judges in positions so that they can be deferential to them? I mean, I understand that some people have come to the conclusion already, but that's what you're asking. It's spooky. That is really scary.
The Fox people do it too. When they talked about the Colorado opinion, it was an all-Democrat appointed Supreme Court. And it's like, yes, but three of them, almost the majority, voted against keeping Trump off the ballot. I mean, so it's either the Democrat thing matters more than anything else or it doesn't. And I've said this before, I have direct personal professional experience with 3 of those justices, Boebert, Syne, and Hood. And all I can tell you is they are ethical, wicked, smart guys. Hood was a great prosecutor in the 18th way back, 20 years ago when I worked for him for 10 seconds before September 11th called me to active duty. And some more I appeared in front of. Boebert was a mentor of mine out in Jeffco. And they're on opposing sides of this issue. Hood weighed in with the majority, and Boebert and Syne are on the other. I don't question at all their political motives. I see why people do. I just think they're wrong. I think it's ill-informed. It's too easy. It's lazy. It's intellectually lazy to dismiss it as well. You were appointed by Democrats. You can't explain the vote that way. These are just 3 guys who fundamentally disagree with each other on this issue. Shocker. That's how it works on the Supreme Court. I mean,
and that's kind of what it's supposed to do.
Yes,
the Supreme Courts in both the states and the U.S. Supreme Court are supposed to reflect the larger body politic. They are supposed to reflect the thoughts and the ideas of the community, and it should not be uniform. If you are looking to get to a place in which any Supreme Court, state or national, if you're looking for uniformity in their thoughts and their decisions, you don't understand how the game is supposed to be played. There should be robust discussion and debate of these ideas because nobody on the left is absolutely right and nobody on the right is absolutely correct either. And somewhere in the middle, we're going to find that.
Present company excluded. Let's be honest.
That's true.
We have a fantastic listener base, as you know. One of them sending some text. 2 things on this day in history. One less important than the other. The less important one is today in 1845, the United States annexed the Republic of Texas.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. The more important one is 1 year ago today, we lost Pele.
Oh, that's awful. And also, I think, is it today or yesterday? 7 years or so. Lemmy Kilmister of Motorhead passes away, which is awful and horrible and tragic. And,
listen, in my own defense, I say Pele. Everybody on the planet knows who I'm talking about. You said, what's his name? Funkmeister?
Lemmy Kilmister.
Lemmy Kilmister
lead singer Motorhead.
is someone no one in the building except you has ever heard of.
Lemmy's a monster, and just the musical talent. I mean, everybody knows Ace of Spades, but going deeper into some of their catalog, it is a real treat to what they were doing back in the day. And the fun thing is everybody should know the song Ace of Spades by Motorhead. If not, stream it today. The fun thing is when you're listening to that, it grew out of a writing exercise that he was doing. It was never supposed to be a song. He was working on how to pattern lyrics and rhyming and to tell a story. And he looked at it afterwards and goes, this is kind of cool. I think I got something for this. He had a riff and he put it together and it became a monster hit. So yeah, Pele's a huge loss too. We still have Messi. We still have Ronaldo. Ronaldo, of course, playing in Saudi Arabia in front of tens of people. That's been a great decision. Have you seen that?
But for tens of jillions of dollars.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Have you seen that, though?
No.
And the Saudi Arabian League has been fantastic because they have splashed a ton of cash. They went out and they got Ronaldo in the following season. They went out and grabbed a whole bunch of really big stars. They got they got Ilkay Gundogan out of
but
Manchester
nobody
City.
cares over there?
Nobody cares about it, and they've got Karim Benzema from Real Madrid. They've got a lot of really good guys. They got Canute. There's a series of people that they bought, but the fans aren't showing up. And so in the stands routinely, now the Ronaldo fans, because it's Ronaldo, you'll get a couple of thousand. But in other games where other stars are playing, they're topping out at 120 people in the stands. Yeah, you can have your own vendor. It's like, hey, Mohammed, how about you go get me a falafel? Something like that. He just sangs that next to you and asks if you need something in the next game. Yeah, so that's basically it. It's been kind of funny. It's been kind of a wake up call. I've been watching some interviews of some of the guys going, yeah, the paycheck's nice, but nobody's in the stands. That's kind of been a shock.
That's funny.
Yeah.
I guess it's what price do you put on whatever you get from the cheering and from the fans. And if it's like, no, I value the dollars more, it sounds like a great place to go.
Oh, exactly.
I wonder, though, if it's like, if they're playing and it feels like it's a practice day. Do you know what I mean? Because nobody's in the stands.
Yeah,
and they're like, I just did something incredible and
Yeah, no one
no
cares.
clapping.
Yeah, exactly. And what does that do to your sharpness? Because there's no fans and things, you could actually be a little more of a goof. There could be things that you're just not as sharp and not. Yeah. So there's some real questions on the international squads, the people that are playing in Saudi Arabia, whether or not they're going to be allowed back onto their international squads, because it's not viewed as a very competitive league. That they're worried that your knife edge has become dulled by playing against softer opponents. So it'll be interesting to see.
Here's something. This is for
what?
you, Billy.
Uh-oh.
Billy, I know I'm way behind, but I just watched all 3 seasons of Ted Lasso. Very funny.
Yeah. Yes.
But I still have no desire to watch soccer.
I get it. And I totally get it, because there's a thing that I appreciate. And again, you love baseball. I appreciate baseball and the strategy. Can't watch it. Cannot watch it. So I get it. I totally understand not being able to watch soccer. I will tell you, and we've had a couple of texters, if you want to have one game and you want to make it enjoyable, you, me, a couple of adult beverages, and I'll talk you through it as far as what's happening, and I'll explain something.
Look,
and
you know
we'll
how
make it
you know
fun.
that's true? Because we did that segment that one time with Get
Steve.
to Know Soccer with Sheriff Reams and Billy.
Yeah.
And Reams was like, I mean, even Reams, who's not a soccer guy, like even he could appreciate that Billy was making the game seem a little more lively and all that stuff.
Yeah, I was texting during some of the World Cup games. I was texting Sheriff Reams and saying, "Okay, watch this. Watch the team do this. They're trying to do this. Watch the counterattack. Pay attention to these two players and what they're doing." It's one of the things. My brother just left town with his wife yesterday, but that was one of the things that he and I had a lot of fun sitting down, and we were talking. We were watching a match, and I turned. I'm like, "Oh, they're this," and he looks at me and he goes, "You are such a dork." And he played too, and he loves the game and is passionate about it. But he looks at me, he's like, "You are looking at this at a granular level that is different than how I'm watching this." He's like, "You're unlocking things inside of what is going on the field." He goes, "I'm looking at this, he's more of this fan thing." And he goes, "And you're diagnosing things. You're diagnosing certain stuff."
Billy, there's probably jillions to be made, not in America, for you doing English or American accented play-by-play or color or something, because you even called me back into the booth before and said, like, "Hey, watch this incredible thing that Joey Jojo Jr. Shabadoo did or whatever." And you're talking through all these guys. I have to watch it 2 or 3 times before I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's right." But you're seeing it. I'm like, there's got to be a way for Billy to get $1 billion doing this.
Oh, thank you. I wish we could, because it's and that conversation, it was about the off-the-ball movement. It was about looking at a player that doesn't have the ball at the time, and how, because of where he went, he opened up space for another player to score a goal, because he froze a defender. That defender had to make a decision and couldn't in that moment, allowing the striker to get that extra 7 to 8 inches that he needed in order to get that space in order to score. So that idea, there's a kid that's playing for my Newcastle Magpies right now that's a youngster, that his off-the-ball movement is staggeringly genius. What he does in order to move other players so that his teammates have space and time is ridiculous based on his aim and his age. So that's one of the things it's interesting you bring that up about the watch along, because there are some channels out there that do watch alongs, and my major critique is they don't talk to me about what's going on in the match. They give me almost no insight. They treat it as a fan base, but they don't give me any other larger conversation.
You should do a YouTube channel, man. Like, how there's I don't know if he's still around, Dan TDM. Who was a dude that was like a Minecraft guy that made cajillions of bucks when he was 5 years old or something, just doing all the play-by-play stuff for Minecraft, right? Like, if you had sort of get to know, but I think you should call it Off the Ball Movement, which is a great name, which is a great name for a company, and also up until today, something I would have used to describe that took place in the back of a car when I was 17.
Yes,
that
exactly.
was different. It was totally different.
Yes.
But with the way you use it, I'm like, oh, okay, that would be a good name for something. Off the ball movement.
I'll have to think about that, because I do talk incessantly during the game when I'm watching with my son. I do talk quite a lot.
Does he ever say, "Dad, pretty please"? Let it go.
No, he talks. He goes back and forth. He's like, "What about this? How about this?" And he asks me, he's like, "Why are they doing this?" And we go back and forth. And he's like, "Oh, did you see this?" We discuss a lot of the strategy. One of the things that I enjoyed watching my brother's team, Tottenham, right now, who they just brought in a brand new coach, Postecoglou, came from Celtic. I know.
That's my favorite kind of pasta.
Yes, exactly. He came over from Celtic, and they have this really interesting idea of not making the easy pass. It is a really interesting thing to watch intellectually, because you can see almost to a player when they turn, there's an easy pass to be made, and you're kind of coached that in soccer. They have been coached the other direction. They see the easy pass, and they immediately look for the more difficult one. And it is fascinating to watch, and also incredibly entertaining, especially for an American, because you don't get a lot of the, passing back and forth boring stuff, which, again, yes, it's boring in soccer when they do that. But again, not everything in basketball, hockey, football, baseball is exciting all the time either. So we all have our boring moments. But yeah, Tottenham is fun to watch right now because they're intellectually aggressive with the ball on the pitch. They're trying to bring the ball forward, and they've almost accepted the fact that we are going to make mistakes. It's almost like the Broncos coming back with Rush and saying, you know what, we are going to throw the ball 20, 30, 40 yards down the field, probably at least once every series. Yeah, we're going to get intercepted, but the trade-off of the amount of times we are going to leapfrog down the field in these big plays, we'll take it. Yeah. We'll accept 4 or 5 interceptions, fine, if we can turn it into 3 to 4 touchdowns.
Russ won't be doing that.
No, he won't. But that's the balance. That's the balance. Tottenham has said, we're okay. We'll give up the ball in these positions, but we know that in the balance of things, we are going to be able to attack more. It's a really, really interesting intellectual position to be in on the field, and I'd love to see the NFL do it. I mean, imagine if you had an NFL coach where, it's like, and we had it a couple of times, every 4th down, we're going for it. We're never kicking an extra point.
You've had some coaches this year demonstrate a willingness to do that way more often than
and you say, we never are going to kick a extra point. We're always going for 2. Things like that. That would be a really interesting intellectual change on the field in the NFL, and that's what Postecoglou has done with Tottenham in England. It's really
I'm going to order that at the next Italian restaurant.
You really should.
Can I get some Postecoglou?
Yes. Yeah, make sure you want it with extra sauce.
Is that the one with the vodka? It is. Here's some people texting in. Did you say off the bowel movement?
No, that's earlier this morning. That was before we got on the air.
Different. Someone else commenting on yesterday's deja vu.
Oh
thing.
Yeah, that was fun.
they were concerned. Says I checked my watch and my pulse several times, as if is this really happening? Like what's going on?
Yeah.
Speaking of judicial impartiality, do you think Thomas should recuse should the Trump election case come before it? If the question is whether Trump engaged in insurrection and Ginny was texting Meadows, it's hard for me to say he would be impartial. I've given him the benefit of the doubt uncomfortably so far, but I think he has to recuse if that happens. I think that's a real talking point. I'm just going to say this. Short of there being a connection stronger than that, I just don't ever want to use the political views or whatever a spouse did or even a kid did as a basis to recuse a judge themselves. And that, I mean, short of them being a party to the case, that's a no-brainer, right?
But how about this, though? How about going back to our earlier conversation about understanding the optics? What are the optics of this decision? And what would happen if it was a Justice Kagan or something that had the same issue, but on the other side? And how would that be viewed by the Trump people, where there was someone else whose spouse was actively involved in maybe keeping Trump off the ballot or something else? But
interestingly, I'm pretty sure that it was Kagan, who was the former president, I think, of Harvard.
Yeah.
I think, right? And then that case that came before the Supreme Court on the discriminatory practices of Harvard, because Harvard hates Asians and all that, she didn't recuse herself.
Yeah, that's a good point.
And that's just a past professional connection and a current allegiance that could be argued. It'd be tough to go down that road. I do think there's some voluntary in the criminal world. I'll say this. There are things that are cause removals, like ethically, cause is probably a term that doesn't fit, but you know what I mean. When a DA says, I can't prosecute this case, there are very few cases that should apply to. But I will tell you, I asked for special prosecutors on a number of cases where I thought, even though it doesn't meet the rule, I think the public could look at that and say, oh, come on. Yeah. And then there are other cases where certain members of the public, the extremists, will point to a case and say, like some say, no DA should be able to decide whether or not to prosecute a police officer in their own jurisdiction because the relationship is too cozy. Well, that's nonsense. Yeah. You could demonstrate that. Like maybe if it was the sheriff, okay, if there was a criminal case against the sheriff, I would recuse myself because that's different, right? That's executive to executive, elected officials who are I know Darren Weekly far better than I know 99% of the deputies on the road. That's different. But that's discretionary, but I would probably do it because people would look at that, especially if the decision was, hey, there's no crime here, we're not going to prosecute. People would go, oh, come on, man. They're two Republican elected officials, in the same jurisdiction. I get that.
When you appointed a special prosecutor, how much influence, control, and direction did you have over that special prosecutor?
Such a great question, Billy. And again, I don't appoint them. What happens is there's a process where I go to the court.
Yeah.
And I say, hey, I need to have a special prosecutor. What the state of Colorado has is an informal, formal kind of agreement with the District Attorney's Council where all of the DAs partner up in something called pods. And those pods are based on geography. And so what happens is you end up, rather than, I need a special prosecutor, and it gets random and a judge goes, hey, DA out in Montrose, I want you to handle this case in Arapahoe County. The DA in Montrose is going to be like, oh, for the love of God, that's like a 5-hour, 4-hour drive. That's a killer. So you make it based on geography. So that part isn't random. But what happens is, so in the 18th, which is huge, Arapahoe County, if we need a special prosecutor, it's supposed to come from Denver. Okay, which horrified me in the last term that I had there, because the way that Denver handles cases and makes decisions on discretion. And by the way, once the special prosecutor takes the case, I don't have any contact with them. I don't have any input on that. Nobody calls me and says, George, what should we do here? In fact, that would be a violation of that whole principle. If it's Douglas County, then it goes to El Paso, and El Paso County comes up. One case where I called my shot, and that was in the Aurora Theater case. There was a member of the SWAT team who ended up shooting an unarmed black man in Aurora. Ultimately cleared, but not by me. As soon as that took place during jury selection, I got a call from Nick Metz, the chief of police of Aurora. He said, George, one of the guys that's a first responder, one of your witnesses on the case, just had this thing. And I was like, okay, that's horrible. I could have gone to Denver, but Denver and Aurora cops work together too. Didn't like that. Wasn't going to El Paso. So I reached out to a jurisdiction that doesn't touch Aurora. Not Denver, not Adams, not us. I reached out to Jeffco. Close enough to handle it. Certainly had the expertise. And had Pete Weir assign some folks. And they grand juried the hell out of this thing. They didn't resolve that case until after the Aurora Theater case was resolved. And their end result was a horrible thing. No violation of the law here. But in my mind, I was like, sweet mother of God, I can't touch this ever, never. So I called Pete, and Pete, to this day, retired DA, has said, I will never answer your phone call ever again. It was such
That's fantastic. That is wonderful.
Anyway, we've gone super long, man. I wanted to ask you about New Year's, but we'll have to do it throughout the show. Hey, listen, let's cut away for a break. When we come back, it's going to be the Thorpe Report, read in about 60 seconds. It's George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler right back with you. We've got really no time to lose. Got to get right to it. It's the Thorpe Report with Billy.
Hey, thank you, sir. Yep. We've got a mother out of Colorado Springs wanted by police in connection with a double homicide of her 2 children that happened earlier in December. It was 12:30 in the morning, December 19th, a 911 call. People were called out to the 5300 block of Palomino Ranch Point, in Colorado Springs, at the report of a burglary. When officers arrived, they found a woman, later identified as 35-year-old Kimberly Singler, and an 11-year-old girl who were both injured. They found a 9-year-old and a 7-year-old, both deceased. Singler was taken to the hospital along with her 11-year-old daughter. They weren't suspects at the time. Since then, the Colorado Springs Police Department Homicide Unit took over the investigation and determined that the burglary report was unfounded, and it appears that Mom killed the 9-year-old and the 7-year-old.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, she is now a suspect. A warrant has been issued for her arrest. She was last seen December 23rd. Wow. Yeah. Also, with only days left to go in the first calendar year, Denver Mayor Mike Johnston, friend of the show, said that he's confident they'll be able to house those 1,000 homeless people. Right now, he said he's got 892 indoors. So we'll see if he makes the list.
You know that how they got to that number will be scrutinized like nothing else.
Oh, yes, absolutely. And, well, it should be. Colorado Cold Case Review Team completed their analysis of the John Benet Ramsey case. Of course, they didn't give us any details, and, of course, we talked about Lauren Boebert moving from one district to a next. There are 7 other candidates that are running for the Republican primary. I bet you can't name more than 3, but that's okay. Also, Pueblo Police Department is asking for the public's help after a 19-year-old was killed near a cemetery earlier in the month. So when officers arrived, they found a 19-year-old suffering life-threatening injuries. There is a joke in there about, well, at least he was at the cemetery, but that seems inappropriate at this point.
Yeah. Well.
And a property management company is stepping in to provide some free housing to migrant families that are arriving in Denver from the southern border. Wasatch Property Group owns and operates several multifamily communities around Denver, and they're saying they're going to help supply furnished housing at no cost for 15 families in need. I have a question about how they make the determination who's being helped, but it's not necessarily a bad thing, but not necessarily saying it's going to be a good thing. We'll see what happens. That's all I got, sir.
Yeah, that's
Back
interesting.
To you. Yeah.
So much going on locally, but we're going to talk about it here in the next hour or so. And by the way, just as a heads up, folks, a programming issue, Jimmy Sengenberger, all E's in the last name, is going to be taken over from 8 to 10 as I hurry myself to the airport to take off for out of town. But you've got me and Billy until that time. Well, you'll always have Billy. Coming up next is going to be the good stuff. It's the You Choose the News. We couldn't do a loser edition, buddy, because we only have one show. Let's see what Billy's got in store for us. Stick around. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler, back on the radio with you here at 710 KNUS. It is that time, the magical time, the special time. It's time for You Choose the News.
Yes, sir. It is that time of the morning where we play everybody's favorite fake radio news game show, You Choose the News. Yes, we have scoured the interwebs for mere moments this morning. Found really stupid headlines because we humans do a lot of dumb things. Surprise. And we've given them dumber headlines to play this fake radio news game because the people in charge don't know we're wasting time doing it. So, shh, it's our secret. Okay, just between you and I. Alrighty, sir, here are your headlines this morning. Headline number 1, an emergency for real Americans. Headline number 2, but what if he was a Kardashian? Headline number 3, sharing the holiday spirit leads to criminal charges. And headline number 4, government doesn't communicate well. Surprise. All righty.
Kardashian.
All right. What if he's a Kardashian? Here we're traveling to the University of Wisconsin. Their system board of regents has fired the lacrosse chancellor, Mr. Joe Gao, because he had somewhat of a side gig
I read this
on Pornhub. Yes, he and his wife were making some sexy videos. And the school said, no, that's not part of your job. We don't like that. Get out. And he said, but I've been doing this for like a decade. How come now it's just an issue, baby? Yeah, see how he's being sexy about it? But the issue that I've got, though, is that I find it interesting that in certain realms we look at it and like, porn. Nope, you can't do the job anymore. But in the case of Kardashian, porn. Hey, have a superstar.
You're famous.
Yes, you're famous. Want to do some makeup? What do you do?
That's obviously a reference to Ray J. But,
exactly.
I saw that article, and the picture, not a bad-looking dude.
I know. Yeah, I'm kind of like, well, if it's going to be, I'm okay. I'm like, if that's your side hustle, okay. If you got to shake the moneymaker, then okay, my man.
Yeah. Like if it was the Family Guy kind of thing, maybe you're
yeah.
like, oh, my God.
Oh,
no,
yeah.
Dude's kind of a good-looking dude.
I know. You're like, okay, fine. All righty, sir. Next choice. Emergency for real Americans, sharing the holiday spirit, or government doesn't communicate.
Holiday spirit.
Sharing the holiday spirit is leading to charges. It is a Christmas miracle that happened on December 24th. Well, unfortunately, Miracle Rivera, yes, that's her real name, 20 years old, and the victim were doing a little drinky on Christmas Eve, and then they got into a fight. It was a verbal altercation about the 24-year-old's alleged infidelity. Well, during the altercation, Miracle Rivera decided to assault said boyfriend with the Christmas tree.
Oh.
Yes, she picked up the Christmas tree and began hitting him with it. The problem I've got, though, inside of this police report, they don't tell me how tall the tree is, which is really important. Because,
I mean,
it's like a 3-foot tree. It's like, ding, fine. But she grabs like an 8-foot and it's like, wagom, going like Mario Party and the big hammer and stuff. That's awesome. Right. Why don't you tell me how big the tree is?
Ornaments everywhere.
Exactly. That's an important part of the story. And they ignore it. And I have questions.
Well, what can you do?
I know. Final choice this morning.
Government.
Government does not communicate well. Here we're going to the brotherly love city of Philadelphia. Recently, Philadelphia, for efficiency, wanted to switch their not entire, but a portion of their vehicle fleet to EVs, for the environment and for efficiency. They went out and they purchased 261 electric vehicles and 107 charging stations. That sounds like a good idea. Except, evidently, when the people that were planning where to put the charging stations, when they were doing their meetings, they didn't talk to the people who were deciding how to distribute the fleet. So now you have charging stations all over the city that aren't anywhere near where the fleets are actually distributed. And why is that a problem? Well, it means that the people that have the electric vehicles have to take them home at night. They can't charge them at home. So what happens is during the day, they have to go out of their way and find the charging stations and then sit there for 30 to 60 minutes doing nothing because they have to charge the vehicle. So again, remember, Philadelphia did this for efficiency, and I'm doing air quotes. And the efficiency result is to have over 200 of their employees routinely sitting in the car doing nothing for an hour a day. That is fantastic. Yeah. If there is nothing else that perfectly encapsulates the decision-making of the government, that's it. Where the charging station people, they said there was an investigation from a TV station there in Philly, and there were some charging stations at places that don't have electric vehicles. And they were like, it's only like 15 minutes.
If you build it, they will come.
Yes, yeah. And the city was like, well, just in case someone with their electric vehicle needs to come to that location. Wait. It's like 20 minutes away. I mean, how they're not driving 300, miles, you idiot. Again.
Billy, there are several times when you do this segment that I am like looking up something for the next segment or something, and I miss how active your hands are.
Oh, yeah,
People
they are.
aren't
I
on the
did move.
YouTubes or the Rumbles. You've got a little Italian in you, and I
Yeah, I
don't mean
do.
in the incarceration
No,
way.
no,
I
not
mean,
at all.
This
Yeah.
is straight up.
Yeah,
There's something.
I do a lot. I do a lot of the talking with the hands. Well,
It
I've
could
got
be
to step
semaphore.
aside.
It could be a code to the Chinese. I don't know.
It could be. I have no idea. It's again. There are just many things happening in this head here, and not all of them are good. I'm just telling you.
How much time we got?
You got 20 seconds. Well, 25 from now.
What do you do with 25 seconds other than try to tee up the 7 o'clock hour? The two big stories, of course, Maine keeping Trump off the ballot and Lauren Boebert's interview. What'd you hear? Give us a call, 303-696-1971. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em Out Shelves, your clutter transformation experts, create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em Out Shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em Out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
It's hour 2 of 4 of the George Show on 710 KNUS. I'll be with you until the top of the hour. That's 8 o'clock. And then Jimmy Sengenberger, all ease, is going to come in, take over the helm. I'm sure he's got a bunch of superstar guests lined up to keep you informed and entertained until 10 a.m. I'll be back when we are back. That is on Tuesday, albeit I think I could be remote. Don't know yet. Think it could be remote. Couple things to tell you about for this weekend. I don't want to convert 7 into the 6 o'clock. I really did want to ask Billy, and maybe I'll have to do it off air, any New Year's resolutions. But one of the things that you might be asking yourself is, hey, in 2024, am I going to take the step to make myself even safer than I am right now? You know the crime numbers. I do. I've lived them for a career. I've only been doing the criminal justice thing for, I can't believe I'm saying this out loud, 29, 30 years now. But I've seen crime, and I've seen that we have here in Colorado some of the best cops you can find in America, but they're not always where you are when you need help. So the Second Amendment exists to give you the opportunity to protect yourself and those that you love. One way to avail yourself of a great opportunity is to go to the Tanner Gun Show this weekend. It's at the Crowne Plaza in Denver, at about I-70 in Chambers. All free parking all the time there for this. It starts today. Maybe it's a belated Christmas gift or Hanukkah gift, or maybe it's a Kwanzaa gift. I don't know. 3 to 7 today, Saturday 9 to 5, Sunday 9 to 4. All the hard-to-find things that you can think of, all the accessories, all the knives, the fishing, the hunting, all the other stuff that you can do. You can do at the Tanner Gun Show. You just have to go on to the TannerGunShow.com website, TannerGunShow, all one word, .com. Get your tickets. A ticket for one day is good for all 3 days. This is the granddaddy of them all. And if I could do my Keith better, it'd be like the granddaddy of them all for gun stuff and for the hunting stuff and for knives and Second Amendment and all that stuff. Tanner Gun Show is the place to be. Check it out this weekend. Up to 30% off of big box stores. There really isn't a good reason to not use your time wisely. Go there and check it out. Now, listen, the 2 topics that we covered, I'm a little biased here because there was such an explosion of text yesterday during and after the conversation with Lauren. I could talk to you about the main opinion. I may want to have some more time to digest that because there were some funny things in there I told you about. Funny, not haha, but interesting. In that last hour. But I do kind of want to revisit the Lauren Boebert interview because this, for the balance of power in the state of Colorado and for the 4th Congressional District, which is a hot potato once Ken Buck decided he wasn't going to run again, it's a big deal what happened. It's unprecedented in my mind. Someone's going to have to tell me another time that a person ran for 2 separate congressional seats within the same state on back-to-back terms. I get moving and then running. I get you get redistricted out of your district and you hop next door. This isn't next door. This is across the state of Colorado. It's a historic move, and I'm interested in knowing, one, whether if you're a 4th congressional district voter, does it even hit your radar that she's leaving the 3rd to run for the 4th, arguably because the 4th is a far more favorable district for Republicans. It's like a 27-point plus R advantage, whereas the 3rd is a plus 9. So, what do you I want to know what you heard in that interview. And so to remind you of it, Billy's found a couple clips. Billy, what do you got there available to us? We're going to play it frontwards and backwards, much like the White Album, see if we can summon the beast. This is the one that for me, I thought was an important question to ask if you live in the 3rd Congressional District. Billy? I'm just saying, what would you say to those who say, hey, listen, this would give a Republican I'm sorry. Go ahead.
George, I'm
sorry.
telling you right now, I am going to complete the remainder of my term in the 3rd District. I love that district, and I'm going to continue to serve them with everything that I have. I just passed my Pueblo Jobs Act, creating at least 1,000 jobs in Pueblo. That's been signed into law. And I have more legislation that's going to impact the 3rd District, and I'm going to continue to work on that throughout this year. And if it needs to roll over, if I have the next Republican who will win that district, get legislation passed for the district, then we'll do that as well.
Interesting. It's interesting. The questions that we asked yesterday are the ones that I think have to be asked, and I think Congresswoman Boebert is prepared to answer them, although some of them weren't answers. They were like the political answers. I'll give you an example. You may recall that yesterday during the interview, I said, have you guys polled in the 4th, taken a poll of folks in the 4th? And it's usually probably a name ID thing. It wouldn't be a preference maybe, but more like a name ID thing. And the answer was, my poll is every time I go to the grocery store. And then we had a conversation about people coming up and saying nice things and bad things and all that. That's not an answer, right? The answer should be, and I'm guessing here, the answer is yes. I can't see anybody with her success, her background, and her profile just willy-nilly pointing to a district and saying, I'm going to go run there without having first tested the temperature of the voters, at least in terms of name ID. So my guess is they polled that, and she blew everyone out of the water because, as Billy pointed out in the Thorpe Report, you can't name more than 3 people in a race that has 7 in it. And my guess is, outside of the listenership of 710, people can't name 2, more than 2. They'll name Lauren Boebert and Deb Flora, or Lauren Boebert and Jerry Sonnenberg, or Lauren Boebert and Mike Lynch. They won't be able to name all the others. That's a huge favor. That's hugely in her favor. But I think that the questions that still remain to be answered are, why not leave the 3rd? And I should ask you this, 303-696-1971, should she leave the 3rd? Should she resign from the 3rd to run for the 4th, or does it matter? And that was that question I asked yesterday too. Are the issues in the 3rd different than the issues in the 4th? Because it feels like to say, I'm fully invested in the 3rd, but oh, by the way, I'm moving outside of the 3rd to the 4th. I don't know when, I don't know where, but it's going to happen. I mean, it's, and I like Lauren. I mean, I've always gotten along well with Congresswoman Boebert, and she has a tremendous amount of guts. I don't always agree with the position she's taken or the decisions she's made, but you just can't deny the fact that she is pretty out there in a way that most Congress people aren't, good or bad. But she has been a leader on some issues. The issue for me is, the question for me is, it looks like we're straddling 2 lily pads, right? We've got a foot on each lily pad, and we're not ready to move completely from one to the other because there are risks and benefits associated with that commitment. This is not the old, what's that, Bill? Brian from Arvada. We love Brian from Arvada. It's a good way to end the year. Brian from Arvada, you're on 710 KNUS. Brian, what do you think?
Hey, I think old Deb Flora might have a shot at that one. I would almost give her a chance.
Tell me.
Yeah, I liked her show and stuff, so I would give her a shot for sure. So Laura.
Yeah. Would you do that compared to Lauren Boebert? Like, when you hear Congresswoman Boebert is coming over to the 4th, what do you think?
Well, I really didn't think much of it, to be honest with you. I was thinking about it, I would probably vote for her. But then I was wondering who, because they said some radio talk show. I didn't know Deb Flora was in it too, so I might, I'll listen to both candidates and stuff and see what they got to say. But, I mean, I really enjoyed Deb's show, so I think she'll pick up a lot of the...
A lot of the what?
The listeners that listen to her between 3 and 4.
That could be. Yeah, that could very well be. I'm not sure that platform dwarfs what Congresswoman Boebert has amassed through her time in office. I mean, I just took a look at her Twitter the other day when she posted that video. 3.1 million followers. What?
Oh man,
that is huge. I think Deb has 3.1 thousand. And I'm not trying to be denigrating to I'm just saying, relatively speaking, even me, I mean, I don't even have 10,000 followers, okay, on Twitter. To have 3.1 million is shocking. That is a huge, huge number. There are celebrities that would beg to have 3.1 million followers. That kind of name ID spends on a ballot in a way that few other things do. In fact, if you think about what a campaign does, is yes, sometimes there are issues, but you're just trying to beef up the name ID, right? Like, you're just trying to get people to the point where when they look at a ballot, if they don't know anything, they know the name. And they go, oh, yeah, I've heard of Lauren Boebert. I like Lauren Boebert. Bam, and they go. So Deb Flora has an uphill battle, as they all do. Maybe Deb has less of an uphill battle because she ran for statewide office in the Senate, came really close to making it out of Assembly. But she has got to have looked at this announcement and thought, you got to be kidding. Come on. I had a real shot at this. Now that shot just got made really harder. The question for you, Brian, that I have is, do you live in the 4th, by the way, Congressional District?
I don't.
Where do you live? What part of town?
Well, I'm by 280. Well, it's Arvada, so.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. For God's sake, Brian, from Arvada. So you're most likely in the 7th Congressional District. Most likely, you're in Heroin Barbie, as Pete calls her, Brittany Pedersen's district. Does it concern you at all that you have someone that says, I'm going to continue to represent one side of the state while I run for office on the other side of the state? Is that an issue for you?
Not really. I haven't really overthought that. So I just thought once I heard of Deb, it would be interesting if they have a debate. So I'll definitely be watching for that.
Hold on. Thank you for bringing that up, my friend. The debate is coming up January the 28th. The women of Weld, who continue to find a way to get every candidate for all the big races together to do these debates, the women of Weld are hosting a debate coming up here on the 28th. I'm going to give you the details right now because it's important. It's actually going to be the 8th and the 4th. So those are huge things. Women of Weld Lincoln Club, sponsored by our buddy Steve, Wells Ranch, and 4x Industrial. I'm sorry, I screwed it up. It's not the 20th. January 25th. Mark it on your calendars. 5 to 9 p.m. Thursday, January the 25th at the Fort Lupton Rec Center. I know it because I'll be there moderating it with super reporter Ernest Lunning. So, buddy, get out there. I bet you they'll have a live stream option, Brian. But if possible, get out there to Fort Lupton, man, and say hi.
Yeah, definitely. It's not a slam dunk for me, so I want to listen to them both debate. I'm open-minded on that one, so we'll see how old Deb does and go from there.
I appreciate that, Brian. Happy New Year to you, man. We'll talk to you in 2024.
You as well.
See you, buddy. Hey, Brian's line is open at 303-696-1971. Is it a big deal to you? Does it matter to you? Let me tell you where I go to, and this is not at all a reflection on how I feel about Congresswoman Boebert. This is just a comparison of situations, all right? Do you remember back in the day when the former First Lady of Arkansas, that is Bill Clinton's wife, Hillary, who spent the bulk of her adult life outside of law school, I think she was a Yalie, in Arkansas. And when she wasn't in Arkansas, she was the First Lady of the United States in Washington, D.C. Do you remember when she announced, I'm running for the U.S. Senate in New York? Like, I've shopped there a ton of times, and I've been to New York many, many times, and we're going to buy a house in New York. I was so pissed off about the idea that New Yorkers would just be like, oh my gosh, that sounds great. Like, where was the New York pride to say, you're not from here, you didn't want to live here, you're just using us as an opportunity to get into the Senate? And by God, it worked, right? It worked. And I remember thinking at the time, I've said this publicly at the time, I'm like, you know what, if Ronald Reagan, who I believe was alive at the time, if Ronald Reagan came back to Colorado and said, you know what, I'd like to be the governor here in Colorado, I'd say, no, dude, I love you. I loved your policies. You were a fantastic president, but you're not from here. You don't live here. The idea that you'll move here, I mean, other people that have run for Congress have done this too. I'll move there if I win. We saw that in the last election cycle with, I can't remember who it was, but they're like, I will live in the 7th Congressional District if I'm elected. I had folks back in 2020 or 2022, I can't remember now. Oh, no, it was the last one. It was right before Ed Perlmutter announced he was dropping out. Everyone thought he was, and he ultimately did. This is the last election. I had folks from D.C., the big Republican folks, reach out and say, we'd like you to consider running for the 7th. And I said, I don't live in the 7th. And they're like, that's okay. You can get an apartment there, and then after you win, you can then move in there. And I'm like, I grew up in the, like Jefferson County, I'm a Lakewood kid. I grew up in Lakewood. So it's not like I don't have connections there, but I said, it doesn't feel good to me. It doesn't feel right that my political ambition is going to trump this principle that representative government matters. And when I say representative government, I mean you elect people that have to live in your jurisdiction for a reason. That doesn't apply to the House, by the way. House of Representatives is exempt. You don't have to live in the district you represent. And that's probably a reflection of the country at the time that everything was put together with the Constitution. But we're different now. And I got to say, I mean, what other office would you tolerate that? I mean, if you had the best law enforcement guy on the planet and they showed up and said, I want to be your sheriff. You're like, well, what do you know about the county? Well, I did a whole bunch of Google searching. I used to vacation here or something or whatever. And I'm not likening that at all to Congresswoman Boebert. Wouldn't you have pause? Wouldn't you be like, wait, I think I'd rather have someone who has been here, is invested in here, and lives here. Or even if they work there. Like I could tolerate if a sheriff or whoever, whatever elected office, had a business like for 10 or 20 years in the jurisdiction. At least then you could be like, okay, you've been here, you've driven the roads, you've lived it, you're experiencing the crime, the application of the law, the whole thing. I personally struggle with the idea that someone, anybody of any party could say, I want to move to your district simply so I can stay in office. That's hard for me. That's really hard. Even if it's like I'm doing great work and I'm going to go do these great things. It's like, yeah, that's tough. That's really, really tough. I can't imagine saying I still want to be district attorney. I think I will move into the 4th Judicial District when Michael Allen is term limited so I can run for DA. The people in the 4th would rightfully be like, well, wait. What's your connection here? And I'd say, well, I've driven through it many times. I was stationed at Fort Carson twice. I've spent a great deal. I mean, I could say those things, but wouldn't El Paso residents look at me and go, yeah, but you're not an El Paso resident, right? Like moving here makes you one of us on paper. It doesn't make you one of us. You know what I'm saying? Maybe I'm just pontificating here on stuff that you don't care about anymore because in your mind it's passé. Like this idea that we're going to have representative government, that's not as important as holding the office or who goes to the office. Maybe that's it. Maybe I'm just old in my thinking. Oh, George, representative government's stupid. As long as we have the right Republican who can fight for the right things, we should support them for any office they run for. Is that where we're at? I don't know. 303-696-1971. Margot from Arvada, you're on 710.
From Arvada.
I'm sorry. It says on my thing. It says Margot from Arvada. Who is it?
It's Margot. You know me, George. How are you?
Oh, hey, how's it going? You're not from Arvada.
I'm not. I'm from Parker.
What's going on? What do you think?
I was calling to weigh in on the Lauren Boebert thing.
Yeah. Tell me.
Yeah, I really like her, and she has a stellar voting record. She's a real America First patriot, but I just think her moving to CD4 to run for Congress will really muddy the waters here. We have some really, really solid candidates running right now, and I really don't understand the logic behind her decision.
And folks that only know Margot from this little call or this voice, Margot is the grassroots. I don't know how better to define it. I got to know Margot 100 years ago, back before she was prenatal, because she's only 30. But I got to know Margot a long time ago. She is the grassroots, right? Like nobody in Douglas County has done as much. Well, few have done as much as Margot has at the grassroots level. So when you say you are skeptical, that tells me something.
Well, and if it were just Lauren, that would be great. But, we have Ted Harvey and Deborah Flora, Jerry Sonnenberg. I mean, we have some really solid conservatives running, and I just don't get it. I guess time will tell, George, but it's concerning to me personally.
Now, concerning is different than I could never. And we saw some of those texts yesterday in the studio. I could never vote for her because of this. Others, of course, said, hey, go, Lauren, go. Are you on the fence about it? Are you waiting to see how the debates go or how the campaign goes? Or in your mind, are you like, I just don't think I could pull the trigger?
No, I'm supporting Ted Harvey, but I know a lot of people feel like I do, that maybe, they haven't made a decision, or they were really close to supporting one or the other of the four that we know so far. I guess time will tell, George. I just don't get it. I really don't understand her motives at this point. And it's distressing to me because we need to win every seat we can. And I was hoping she would stay in CD4 or CD3, and maybe we could get a bunch of people there on the ground to help her retain that seat.
I think I really appreciate the measured approach you've taken to this, Margot. I would say this, I think there are two separate decisions. The decision to leave the CD3 race, honestly, as strong of a conservative as she is, probably increases our chances of winning CD3 and holding on to it, because she was right. I mean, everything she said yesterday was right, and that is, hey, Hollywood, the lefty elitists out there on the coast, they have dumped jillions into this race to defeat me, and I think she probably saw polling, and she saw the fundraising numbers and thought, I'm not going to win this. Republicans need to hold this seat. That is a great answer, right? Like that decision, I totally get it. As much as we want her to stay in the third, I think she was right to see that she wasn't going to probably hold that seat. The separate decision is the one that's confounding you, and it's the one that we're talking about, and that is, why come to the fourth? Like, it's all the way across the state. It's not next door. You didn't grow up here. And again, I'm not saying she can't do a great job. I'm saying it's just an issue in my mind. And is that passé? I mean, when you think about it, Margot, is that ridiculous to think of representative government as, I'd like you to have at least been amongst us for more than a cup of coffee?
Yes, I do. Douglas County makes up about 46% of CD4. And so in my mind, I think we need a representative from Douglas County. Weld, obviously, Boebert, they all play a role, of course. But I just don't understand her motives. I mean, I understand that she could, she's worried about CD3, and I get that, but just to skip around, it makes no sense to me. But she has a right to do it. I mean,
she does.
are.
And I'm going to cheer her on in this way. If she's moving to the fourth, I hope it's Douglas County. No knock on Weld. No knock. I hope it's Douglas or Boebert or something. You know what I mean? Down by us. I hope it's down by us, so that if she pulls this thing off, and if you ask me to bet Margot, I'd say she wins right now. If the election were held today, just based off the name ID. I'd like to have our congressional representative live in our county. That would be awesome.
Yeah. I agree with you, George. Same.
Margot, Happy New Year. Please say hi to your fantastic husband for me, and I hope to see you guys in the new year.
You too, George. Have a happy and healthy New Year.
Same. See ya. Hey, so we're going to cut away for a break, and then when we come back, we're going to get to, we got calls lined up here. Margot's line is open, 303-696-1971 is the number. We got Steve and Jim. I promise we'll get to you. I just got to do a quick read here and let you know about ending 2023. Chances are you're not going to buy a house or close on it in the next few days, but in 2024, things are looking up. The interest rates will go down, but the supply of homes is not going to shoot up, and that means there is a timing to when you want to sell your house for maximum dollars and get into that dream house and not get crushed with the idea that everyone and their mother thinks this is the right time to buy a house. Timing is critical. You can either guess, and maybe you'll get it right, or you can call Gabe Ribble at the Empower Home team at Keller Williams, and you can get expert advice based on decades of experience in this exact economy, in some version of this, and in this exact geographic setting, up and down the Front Range metro area. They do houses all over the state. When Gay was in the studio, she talked to you about some of the best places to buy homes. We're up there in Weld County, and some of those communities that are just starting to take off, they know stuff that others don't. Don't go with amateurs. Don't go with folks that have been doing this for a couple years as a side gig. This is Gay's passion. This is her career. Get her expertise at 833-301-SOLD, 833-301-SOLD. You can also check them out at sellwithcertaintycolorado.com, sellwithcertaintycolorado.com. When we come back, it's going to be Steve, Jim, everybody else, and the text. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. A little bit of foo right here on 710 KNUS. George Brauchler with you. We are going to get to Steve, Jim, and Jay and some of these texts here in just a moment. 2024 upon us. Ultra Botanica are the geniuses out there who put together this patented all-natural curcumin-based supplement that I actually need to go get some more of, and I'll tell you why. Had some ridiculous swelling, like painish kind of thing. Not swelling where it's, visible, but like you can feel it in and around my Achilles. That is just an ongoing lifetime kind of thing, at least since I've been an adult, whenever I run, and I want to get that stuff addressed. In the past, when I've taken UltraCur, which you can get at your natural grocers, it has always worked to speed that pain going away and to help me get back to recovery. So I'm going to do that again. I recommend you do it yourself. It's not just for things like that, by the way, because it's got that curcumin base. It's an antioxidant, anti-inflammatory. Overall health improves. You can join the I don't know how many jillions now have tried this thing. Do it for free. It costs you nothing. Go to the vitamin manager at your natural grocers. Ask for your 3-day free supply. You're going to experience, you could be an outlier, but just about everybody experiences relief within the 3 days. Half the people in 48 hours, and half of that group within 2. Join them by going to the natural grocers right now. Listen, let's get right to the phone lines. It's Steve. Steve, you're on 710. What do you think?
Yeah, hey, George.
Hey.
I don't know, a couple things to react to what you're saying. I mean, I think you have this idea that the fourth and the third are pretty remote from one another, and that's maybe part of the analysis, and I disagree with that. They actually share a border, from Pueblo, from the bottom of El Paso County down to New Mexico. So and in some sense, Boebert is already representing tons of rural Coloradans, and so rural Coloradans, are sort of rural Coloradans. They're going to share certain issues. They're going to share issues over water and the state of development of rural America and having resources, access to medical care, things like that they're all going to share. So I'm not too bothered by that. The election commission, whatever, the districting commission and the legislature and the courts and whoever looked at it said, hey, you know what? The interests of Aspen and La Junta, Colorado are close enough that we're going to consider them all the third district. So I don't know. Is it that much different to say, okay, Lauren's going to represent Greeley and, and Sterling down to, Springfield or something like, okay, whatever.
So it doesn't matter to you as much. And I get the rural stuff, and I think Lauren's harped on that and effectively, and that is, look, rural Colorado is the distinction. It's not like I'm going from, Diana DeGette's district out to, Sterling. But at the same time, her district may extend to a border down south there, but she's from Grand Junction area, right? Like Rifle. That is that is so far from Sterling, Colorado. You can't get there.
I looked it up
here.
yesterday during your interview. She, she spent time when she was young in Aurora and thereabouts in the Denver metro area, which, in my mind, that's close enough to Douglas. I'm not, it doesn't bother me as much as, if Ken Buck, say, ran down, and tried to run in the 23rd JD as the DA, I think that I would have a problem with that. I'd say, well, what the hell? No, you're fine to be the DA up in the 19th or whatever you want to do up there, but you don't need to come down here. You don't know anything about this. Or run for a county commissioner in Pueblo County or something. I'd be like, well, what the hell? You can't administer government in a place you don't belong there. But to represent the people that live in a district, you're spending 75% of your time in Washington, D.C. anyway. It's
well, and that's her other point too. Is that, listen, I'm on the road all the time, right? And what I heard her say, both on our show and on some others that I listened to yesterday, was that she's like, man, people sure are concerned where I lay my head, but this is where and I'm like, wait, don't be so quick to dismiss that. I get that what you're saying, Steve, makes a lot of sense to me, but at the same time, where you live, where your interests are, that matters to me. And I think the concern that, and maybe this is antiquated now, the concern that I have is, are we encouraging an environment where people are just running in places they think they can win, and after the fact will go live there? That's tougher for me.
Yes, it's a problem, but here's the other thing. If the other side's going to play that game, and they do, and you mentioned Hillary Clinton, and I'm sure there's lots of other, hell, the governor of California just appointed a person to the Senate there from California.
Yeah, that's right.
And spend 10 minutes in California.
You're right. You're right. Vacation time.
So if the other side is going to do it for their own political expediency, if we don't do it, I just think it's another example of us holding
Steve,
on
I'm
to
so
some
glad
chivalry
you brought that up.
from a days past, and it just causes us to lose.
Is it chivalry? Or is it principle? And I'm glad you brought it up in the way that you did, because we have these thoughts and conversations all the time, and that is, should we lower our bar to match theirs? And if we're not, is that a failure? Is it a failure of us to want to win bad enough that we're not willing to go where they go in terms of principles? And I'm not convinced that should be us.
Well, I think talk to me after we win about 4 different election cycles, and we've
here in
clawed
Colorado,
back some control of in Colorado, in the country. You find a place where Republicans have started to at least be competitive, and then I think we have the luxury of principle. But until then, it's
hold
just,
on. That is such
it's
a
Al Davis.
magical
It's just
phrase,
win,
Steve.
baby.
The luxury of principle. Think about that. Is such a brilliant phrase, Steve. Is principle a luxury? Is principle just for those in charge? But whatever we do to get there, we don't have to subscribe to the principles. It's once we get there, then we put them out. And if that's the case, are they principles, or are these just some
That's a
sort
good
of
question, and I don't
aspirational
like it, but I want
ideas?
to say, if you don't have 50+1 on your side of the legislature, it really kind of doesn't matter what your thoughts are. And if you're one vote away from being in a super minority, boy, it really doesn't matter what your principles are.
I think I would say, Steve, if we looked at polling and it showed that only Lauren Boebert could win the 4th, and maybe this is a violation of the principle, my attitude might be different, right? Like my attitude and my concerns might be different. Like, yeah, but we really have to win that seat. In this particular case, it's an R+27. Steve, if you get the nomination, you will be the next congressman from the 4th Congressional District. So that's not an issue here. It's not an issue of, is she the only one that can get this done? And by the way,
you're right.
She'd be the most experienced, without any close second place, the most experienced person running for Congress in that seat, just based off of her 2 terms there in serving in committees and the bills and all that. That part is true. And again, I still think Lauren Boebert ends up winning this thing. And I think she probably, if things were the way they are right now, she ends up becoming the next congresswoman which would make her my congresswoman. So I don't want anyone to perceive this as me attacking her, other than to question. And there have to be conversations like this, Steve. You and I have to be able to talk like this. Does it matter anymore? And what I hear you saying is not that, no, it doesn't matter, but let's not let it matter and keep us from winning. And then once we win, it can matter more.
That's part of it, and where she sort of, where her residence is, air quotes residence, is probably less important amongst other considerations of whether Boebert is the right Republican to send up from the state. She does garner a lot of, it's sort of Trump derangement syndrome. She garners her own set of sort of Boebert derangement syndrome. I mean, for whatever reason, she ignites the other side to just absolutely despise her and everything she does. And
you're describing the Trumpster,
that is
too.
a thing. That's a concern. It brings negative attention to a political movement that's already sort of way behind the 8 ball.
And Steve, you've also described some of the characteristics of the DJ tier, who I think, if the election were held today, would likely be president. Steve, I got to cut you loose, by the way. Great phone call. I love the issues. I love that phrase, the luxury of principle. I love that idea. 303-696-1971. Jim and Jay, I promise I'll get to you before we cut out of this hour here. I just got to cut away for a break as Billy's in my ear telling me, hey, please pretend like the clock matters. You know who can do a great job for you? Anytime you've been hurt by someone else, you don't know where to go. And I don't mean just the law stuff, because a lot of people get hurt and they try to figure out, how am I going to pay for this injury? Like, I'm in pain right now. I don't have insurance, or my insurance is insufficient. How can I figure out a way to get the help that I need? You know who knows the answers to that? Dan Kaplis. Dan Kaplis and Boebert Waheed at the Dan Kaplis Law Firm, which you can easily find at dankaplislaw.com. These guys have been working with victims just like you, or just like your loved one in these situations, for decades. There are a lot of people that get hurt, that their insurance is insufficient. They've been hurt by someone who doesn't have insurance, or an insurance company that is withholding certain benefits that you should be entitled to. Dan and Boebert know how to get you that help. Call them today, 303-770-5551, 303-770-5551. The justice you deserve, the help that you need. DanCaplisLaw.com, CAPLIS, DanCaplisLaw.com. When we come back, it's going to be Jim and Jay and everybody else filling up Steve's empty line. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS. George Brauchler back with you here, 710 KNUS, our final segment before I turn it over to Jimmy Sengenberger, all E's in the last name. I'm going to get to the callers that I can on the line. Got to quick tell you about Mitch Floria with the Art of Granite. This is the wizard / marksman / entrepreneur / American patriot who will install and upgrade the countertops in your bathroom, your kitchen, laundry room if you got it, the finished basement, bathroom, doesn't matter. This guy can do it all. Don't be confused or deceived by the title of the website, The Art of Granite. Go check it out, theartofgranite.com. But it's more than granite. It's marble. It's quartz. If God can make it or man can make it, he can turn it into a countertop for you. He will also do this for you. Everybody gets wholesale prices because that's just the businessman Mitch is. But he will also, if you tell him you're a George listener, a 710 listener, give you the bathroom countertop for free with the kitchen countertop package. If you're only doing one room, he'll throw in the sink for free. Give him a call, 303-386-5919, 303-386-5919. Let's get back to the phone lines. Jim, you're on 710 KNUS. Jim, what do you think?
Hey, good morning. As far as Lauren Boebert moving over here to the Eastern Plains, I'm against it. I'm pretty sure Weld County and Elbert County could handle it just fine, but Douglas County is a whole different story. The last time that Douglas County had a screaming peacock was the school board in 2010 or so with Justin Williams, and that guy single-handedly destroyed the school board for years to come, and we're still feeling the repercussions of that, and that was just the school board. If Lauren Boebert brings her three-ring circus to Douglas County, is just going to pull all the low-information Democrats off their couch, and they're all going to vote. So you might as well just call Douglas County a blue county at that stage.
I hope you're wrong about that. I do think, though, that what we've heard with calls like Margot's and some other texts is that the conservative base in Douglas, at least, it's not going to roll over for anybody. In fact, when Margot says, hey, I'm a Ted Harvey guy, Ted, former state senator, he's been a dude that's worked at the top levels nationally. And Ted, if you've looked at any of Ted's social media stuff, Jim, you don't have to worry about this being a rollover job. I think these guys are going to continue to fight a pitched battle just amongst the grassroots folks. But having said that, I still think Lauren wins. This is a name ID game, yes. Period.
I think the undisciplined people like Lauren Boebert and Justin Williams need to be kept off the ballot by reasonable people that debate it before the election like we are doing right now.
Jim, Happy New Year, man. As always, great to hear from you. We'll talk to you in the next year. Jim's line is open. Let's get to Jay. Jay, you're on 710. What do you think, Jay?
Hey, hands down to Steve.
You liked his comments.
He's a good guy. He's
Yeah.
got common sense. I'm a farmer and a rancher, born and raised in that, and I even got into the oil field a little bit and a semi driver. I got a truck company. So I've been into all of the industries. Like Reagan said in 89, bad things will happen when good men stand down. Well, you know what? We don't think that people are going to get this lunacy, and they have.
So where you're coming from, and Jay, I think you live don't you live up in the Northeast somewhere?
Sterling, yeah.
Yeah, Sterling,
no,
so you're there.
That's what we farm at.
Does it matter to you who represents you in terms of not the ideology, but in terms of whether or not they've, like Jerry Sonnenberg? You got to know Jerry. If you're from Sterling, you have to know Jerry Sonnenberg.
I know Jerry.
Yeah.
Well,
so
yes,
dude
I've known Jerry my whole life.
has your background. Would you choose, I'm not asking you to endorse anyone. I'm saying, would you choose someone who's been a rancher from the Northeast, even if they had less name ID, no experience in Congress, over someone like Congresswoman Boebert, or I'm going to throw out any other name, MTG, Ted Cruz, whoever? Who would you choose?
No, because I'm going to tell you why. Because they have lived a life, and they don't know what it takes. I mean, these people that go to the supermarket, they just see the food and the stuff that we produce. They don't see the labor that goes into pulling a calf in the middle of the winter. They didn't live that lifestyle, to save a calf and bring it into your porch. They didn't live that lifestyle. They didn't live trying to figure out how they're going to plant their next crop of corn to feed their family. You know, they always called it a bumper crop. You know, I mean, as farmers, whatever have you. You know, I mean, in 10 minutes, all your hard work. In 10 minutes, a hail cloud could come across, and all your hard work just went out the window. And Steve Wells is another one. Steve Wells is another good guy.
Yep, Steve Wells from Weld County. Great dude. We love him. He's a friend of 710. Jay, I got to cut you loose because Billy's telling me we're running out of time here. Jay, have a happy new year. We'll talk to you in 2024. Billy, how much time we got left? Music in 3 seconds. That doesn't give me enough time to take Carol. Carol, forgive me. Stick around, though. Maybe Jimmy, too, I'm sure would entertain callers. He loves callers. Hey, thanks, folks. It's been a great 2023. I'll be back with you in 2024. Billy, have a happy new year to you and your family. Listeners, same thing. My thanks to everybody that's made this show so fantastic this year. G, James, Kelly, Brian, all those folks. I'll be back with you in 2024. George Brauchler, 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes. All in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Good morning, happy Friday, happy New Year. Jimmy Sengenberger taking over for George Brauchler for the rest of the show this morning. Thanks for being along for the ride till 10 o'clock as we round out the year of 2023 for weekday programming. Good to be with you. Of course, I host the Jimmy Sengenberger Show Saturday mornings from 6 to 9 right here on 710 KNUS. Looking forward to tomorrow's show. I'll tee that up later on in the program. We've got some really fun stuff in store. If you want to join into the festivities, we'll get back to the phones in a moment at 303-696-1971. And of course, keep those texts coming on the 710 KNUS app on your smartphone. Name and town if you wish to text in, please. So I know George was talking about the Boebert switch. She's moving from the 3rd Congressional District into the 4th as far as her candidacy is concerned, maintaining the position in the 3rd in Congress. She's still there to fill out her term in the other district while she's running for CD4. And it's been fascinating to see some of the reaction and response. And here's some of it as I was coming into the station this morning from various angles. I mean, there's a lot to consider when you're talking about a major political player like Lauren Boebert saying, I'm going to hightail it on out of my current district because of all the, as she talked about with George on the program yesterday, dark money coming after her. And frankly, she's made some slips that have hurt her as well in the 3rd CD and her chances and made her a more vulnerable candidate. I love Lauren Boebert, but it is true that there are some weaknesses that she has developed over her tenure that have made her a target more for the left. And there's only one way that Adam Frisch could raise as much money as he did, and that is not just, dark money, but if they have a candidate that they can make into a boogeyman or a boogie woman in this case and say, hey, give us money because she's terrible. And they can then make that case. So clearly, CD3 was a very difficult re-election bid for Lauren Boebert, so she makes the switch to CD4. And there are many different arguments, of course, one way or the other, for why folks are supportive of her track record standing up for critical issues and values and principles that must be stood for in Congress, without a doubt. She is a fighter. She epitomizes the fighter in many respects. But at the same time, you have one of the issues, of course, that George was talking about in the last hour. And that is, she's coming into another district. She doesn't live here. She may have lived here a little bit, she says, when she was younger, when she was a kid, but she's not from this district. She doesn't live here. It's clear that she's running because it's a better likelihood for a Republican to hold this seat in CD4 than in CD3 if she's the candidate in CD3. So there's a question. Would you vote for Boebert or not? Because she is coming into this state or this district from another district, not living in CD4. And we'll get to that more in a moment. But I have to tell you the dumbest reason to complain about Boebert making this switch. Just the one that makes absolutely no sense. And not only that, it's just plain stupid. So there is this email list. I don't know how exactly I got on it. Other people I've talked to don't exactly know how they got on it, especially because, they're not activist Republicans. They're just registered Republicans. But this happens where people buy and sell or trade lists or what have you. But there's this email list called Rhino Watch Colorado. And it keeps track of the Republicans in name only, the rhinos that are a scourge upon Colorado. Because the Rhino Watch folks, whoever these mysterious people are, have somehow been empowered as the arbiters of what is a Republican. What makes a Republican that you can tolerate, you can respect, you can accept as a Republican? You might be praised, or you could end up on the Rhino Wall of Shame. Well, the Rhino Watch folks put out an email this morning saying Boebert surrenders CD3 to the enemy. Representative Lauren Boebert disappoints with the announcement she will abandon her CD3 constituents and seek the GOP nomination in CD4. It's a self-serving bid to hold on to political power. Boebert has her issues, but at least she's an American First candidate. She's an America First candidate, okay. And they're saying, okay, this is a self-serving bid. All right, we hear that. People are throwing those points out there. But this is the stupid part. Her move guarantees CD3 will now go to a Democrat or a uniparty Republican in name only. A uniparty Rhino. The enemy. That would probably be Jeff Hurd, at least as of now. That was the lead opponent to Lauren Boebert. But here's the thing that's absolutely dumb about that sentence. If you are a partisan Republican, the enemy is not the other Republicans who might get elected to the legislature. The enemy is the Democrat. Right? Because if Democrats take control of the U.S. House of Representatives, there is no Speaker Mike Johnson. There is no Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan. Republicans don't get to set the agenda. If in 2024, the worst case scenario, the House and the Senate and the presidency are all lost to the Democrats and Biden gets reelected, then his agenda, the Biden agenda, gets to be rammed through. On the other hand, if Republicans hold the House, then they're able to at least push back against a lot of the drivel that the Democrats want to ram through. And that only happens if, for example, the 3rd Congressional District, seen by Democrats up to this point, prior to Boebert's announcement, as one of their biggest pickups in the country. They want CD3. And I grew up listening to talk radio and hearing Mike Rosen talk about party Trump's person. The idea being that you need to have control of the legislature for your party in order to move your agenda forward, or at the very least, stop the other side. Because in Europe, they form their coalitions after the election. Their parties get in office, and then they decide, okay, who's going to actually be in charge? How is this going to work? Whereas in the United States, we vote Republican, we vote Democrat. Whoever gets control ends up in charge of the chamber. It's a done deal at that point. The only time any negotiations might happen is if you happen to have somebody who's an unaffiliated or independent and you want them to caucus with your party or the other. That's where you could have a little bit of a change. But that's not something that happens in terms of actually making a big difference. At least it hasn't to this point. Normally, you're like Ben Nighthorse Campbell and you'll change parties, and then that will end up switching to the other side in terms of control of the body, House or Senate. But fundamentally here, you want a Republican, whoever that Republican is in the general election, to get into the U.S. House. It is not an enemy to have a Republican that isn't your ideal Republican when you're talking about the legislature, the Congress. And yet they have declared that Boebert has committed a shameful act in switching to CD4 and letting either a Democrat or the uniparty Republican win. It's nonsense. It is much more understandable to make an argument, oh, well, should she be running in the 4th CD? That's not her district, not where she lives. Which brings us at 303-696-1971 to Frank in Golden. Good morning, Frank. Jimmy in for George. How are you?
Hey, Jimmy. Okay. How about yourself?
I'm doing just fine. Happy New Year.
Yeah, Happy New Year. Hey, I think this needs kind of like an emperor has no clothes moment here. I mean, I don't think there's some mystery. Lauren Boebert knew she was going down in flames in the 3rd. Mm-hmm. And regardless of what these Rhino email list people think, it may actually help the Republican Party because I think there is a larger conservative group out there than there is a Democratic group.
No doubt.
And so, look, she won by 500 votes before all the other nonsense, so she was going to get clobbered. But this is basically just somebody who's become an attention seeker, carpetbagging to another district that she really has absolutely no connection to whatsoever. I don't know if she's ever lived there. I don't know if she's driven through there. I suspect she has at some point in her life. But, I mean, this doesn't make a lick of sense. And it really does take away from legitimate candidates, who actually have some form of a connection there.
Now, I want to jump in real quick on one point, Frank, because it does make sense in two ways. One, you're right. It was razor thin. She barely held on to the 3rd CD, and that district almost certainly, if she was the nominee, was going to fall. I don't think that Boebert had any chance of winning in the general election, and she might have even lost the primary. The 4th CD, though, this would be the second benefit. One, you don't have a guaranteed loss. Number two, in the 4th CD, it is a solidly Republican district, and name ID can help drive success in that context. So you're more likely by far to win in this seat, even though she doesn't have those kinds of connections. Of course, the argument can be made in the primary. You are not from this district. You used the term just now, Frank, carpetbagger. That could be thrown at her. That can be an argument in the primary, but if she gets through the primary and gets to the general, then she's very likely to win, and then it makes all the sense in the world.
Yeah, but I guess why doesn't it make all the sense in the world to just let Deborah Flora have a chance here and just let Lauren, who's made her own bed here, lie in it? I mean, I don't. The other thing that bothers me about this is that there's something that's kind of going unspoken here, other than the obvious just attention-seeking component of this. How successful a congressperson has Lauren Boebert been? She's been successful in being a lightning rod, but has she been successful in being a congressperson?
Fair question.
And I don't think she really has. The other thing that bothers me, and I listened to part of her stuff yesterday on the show, and I read part of her statement, and it just does she take people for idiots? I mean, she's talking about how she is doing this for her family and all this other stuff. She's going through a freaking divorce. Do you want a congressperson of any stripe preoccupied with an ugly divorce?
Well, the same question can be applied to any candidate who has personal issues that go on in that regard, or in terms of like legal issues that are coming up. And folks can pose those kinds of questions, but she would not be the first elected official or candidate running for office while going through a divorce.
She also isn't the first elected or potential electable candidate who's invoking family while going to spend almost 3/4 of her time in Washington D.C. I mean, this is just purely all this whole run is for Lauren. There isn't anything else about this. This isn't some flowery, for the better good of the country and all this other nonsense. This is just her. This is just her seeking attention and trying to stay in the limelight and trying to stay relevant. That's all this is.
Frank, your passion here is shining through, making some strong points. So appreciate the call. Happy New Year to you.
Yeah, you too.
Our telephone number, 303-696-1971. Is this all self-serving? That's an argument you're going to continue to hear. And I mean, frankly, it does advantage her. It is literally self-serving in the sense that it makes it far more likely for Boebert to hold her position in Congress. It'll be a different seat representing a different district, but it's much more likely. That certainly does serve any self-desire, self-interest to retain a position in power in Congress. But is there more value to it? Does she bring something to the table that is particularly unique, particularly strong, and also that will win over the voters in the 4th Congressional District? 303-696-1971. We'll keep calls going. We also will be joined in just a bit by Roshini Rajkumar, who's the host of a podcast called The Crisis Files. She's an experienced and tremendous communication coach. She's based out of Minnesota. Want to talk a little bit about 2023 in retrospect, but really, I'd love to get her take as well on this particular issue of Boebert. From being outside of the state, what does she think? How is this being perceived elsewhere in terms of that position or that shift for Boebert? Before we go to our break, though, let's jump over to Steve in Littleton. Good morning, Steve. What's on your mind?
Hey, Jimmy. So I just wanted to call in and bring to the attention, seems like a couple callers claim to be conservative, but they're not. You know, give you an example. The last 3 years, I've had to take out numerous loans. I've had to work second and third jobs in order to meet my bills, where before 3 years ago it wasn't a problem. Lauren Boebert's always been on the side of President Trump. She's always defended conservative values. People obviously aren't watching C-SPAN enough to see what she speaks about when she is in D.C. Along the same lines like Ted Cruz, Marjorie Taylor Greene. They're all for the Constitution, supporting the conservative values, sometimes more extreme than others. But it took an extreme person to take the White House, and that was Donald Trump. He wasn't the normal character.
I would say that 2016 was a rather unique election cycle, and you had just come out of 2 terms of Obama. And so the American people were ripe for a change, and Donald Trump proved to be an effective candidate. I don't think that they were going for him because he was an extreme candidate in that regard, Steve. I would disagree with you there.
Well, yeah. I mean, I can understand that also. It was, I don't know, they just wanted to stay in power, I guess.
Here's the thing, though, and this is a question that I think is going to need to be answered, is what, listeners posed it before, what has Boebert accomplished in Congress? What legislation has she actually gotten through beyond being somebody who uses the bully pulpit of the floor of Congress or a committee hearing or a cable news interview or coming on the radio here with George or me or anybody else? What has she done other than shine light on some issues? Is that enough for a member of Congress when you have all sorts of people in the media and elsewhere who do that? Real quick, Steve.
Well, honestly, I think she might be getting beat down slightly from the people that are more senior as far as when she's bringing things to the light. But I know she helped with when they were trying to push through the Colorado River back down, taking more water from Colorado River. Arizona's trying to petition more water.
Sure.
I know that was one thing that she was fighting for. But no, I mean, I honestly can't say.
Yeah.
But what she did go
that's for. One thing, as she wants to run for a new district, she's going to have to highlight is these are the things that I've accomplished. You should let me bring this to CD4, because it's not just about the name. Name ID is the biggest thing to propel somebody to win, but that's not the case that you can make. You have to say, this is what I'm going to bring to the district, and it has to include, I think, some things that you've accomplished. But, Steve, I got to run to a break.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the call. Happy New Year,
Jimmy.
brother.
Hey, you too. Take care.
Thank you. We're going to take a quick break. On the other side, we'll get some perspective from communication coach, host of the Crisis Files podcast, Roshini Rajkumar, Jimmy Sengenberger, filling out the rest of the show for George Brauchler here on News Talk 710 KNUS. Good morning, Jimmy Sengenberger here with you and for George Brauchler News Talk 710 KNUS. Happy New Year. Good to be with you, rounding out the weekday talk on the program before the new year begins. Can you believe that 2023 is just about over? Just a couple of days left. Good to be with you. We'll get back to the phones in a little bit at 303-696-1971. Of course, you can text into the show as well on the 710 KNUS app on your smartphone. Name and town if you wish to text in, please. And, of course, you can also email yours truly. If you go to the Jimmy Sengenberger Show page, that's my show Saturday morning, 6 to 9 at 710knus.com. You can shoot me an email there, and then there's my website, jimmysengenberger.com. Keep in mind, there's no A, I, or U in Sengenberger. It's all E's all the time. Once you know that, Sengenberger is easy. So, this story regarding Lauren Boebert has been very fascinating, moving from the 3rd Congressional District into the 4th. It is interesting, especially given that she's become a very nationally known name, and so folks everywhere across the country can have some familiarity with Boebert. This is also just a general rarity of somebody moving from one district to another. That's the first topic that I want to hit on before we look back at 2023 and some of the big headlines with Roshini Rajkumar, good friend of mine who's been on my show as a guest for almost a decade. She is a crisis strategist, a licensed attorney, and the host of the Crisis Files podcast, which is now about to debut its 75th episode. From 2012 to 2021, she hosted Real Talk with Roshini on WCCO Radio in the Twin Cities in Minnesota, and her book, Communicate That, is in its 3rd edition. Roshini Rajkumar joins me now. Good morning, Roshini, and Happy New Year.
Good morning, Jimmy. Great to be with you on this last Friday of the year.
Great to have you on the program for this final Friday. And I would be remiss, because it's been just the talk for days here in Denver, if I didn't get your take, especially as a crisis strategist and as a communications coach, on this decision by our Congresswoman for the 3rd Congressional District in Colorado, Lauren Boebert, to make a switch to the 4th District. Now, she was on with George Brauchler yesterday and talked about a couple of her reasons. One being, look, they've been throwing all this dark money at me, and it makes it more difficult for me to win in this district. Number 2, I have some roots in Douglas County because I lived here in my younger days and so forth. Those are a couple of the things. Of course, it seems more like the number 1 was the case. She was probably going to lose. CD4 is more of a Republican district, a solidly Republican district, meaning good chance that if she wins the nomination, there's a primary with several candidates she's jumping into, that she'll win in the general. But what is your take, sort of abstractly, as somebody who doesn't live here, who doesn't know too much about the situation? How do you think of this approach it yourself, but also from the perspective of people who may hear this news out of state?
Well, the obvious accusation of carpetbagging is there for sure. And it really does sound like she's trying to cherry pick where she's going to get those votes. And when these types of things happen with office holders, I am very dismayed, because really they should be looking at their record. What did you do for the people of CD3? Can you just not make a good case anymore that you should be reelected, or the signs are, the writing's on the wall that you're going to lose? Oh, let me go pick another district. I mean, that in itself is pretty disingenuous, unless she's just so popular and has such a great chance in CD4, and there's some overwhelming need to represent the people of Colorado and CD4. It's kind of hard to make a real passionate plea for her case. I mean, I'm just saying that as a non-Coloradan, and also just from the optics of all of this. And she isn't someone who apparently is squeaky clean with the fact that she's made national headlines with some of her different behaviors. So I think it's just going to be interesting to watch. People like you and I, we really do like watching these kinds of antics. It makes the shows fun and interesting. But the people of those 2 districts are really the ones who should call her on whatever she's doing, because they ultimately are the people who are voting.
So there is a very strong primary of several candidates, as I mentioned, that she's jumping into this race for. If you were one of those candidates, what might you contend on the basis of, obviously, you're not in Colorado, so you don't have all the information, but what, at first brush, might be, from a communication standpoint, one or two of the most effective points in a primary for somebody who, frankly, Lauren Boebert is very popular among the Republican base because she's a America First candidate. She's very close to President Trump, and a lot of Republicans that find that very appealing. So with that in mind, what might you think? Okay, you're running in a primary against Boebert. What might you say?
Well, the other candidates, of course, each of them has to first assess how well known am I? What kind of credibility do I have, even if I go about and attack her? Can I use my own credentials, my own history if I've served in office before? The other main thing is really to use language of manipulation. She sounds like she's manipulating you, people in the fourth, different things like that, so that you sort of put the seed in their mind, the seed of doubt in their mind. So that would be the strategy I would advise any of these other candidates, not fully knowing who they all are and what strengths or weaknesses they have. But that's probably the best way to go. But I always think it's dangerous to point too much at your opposition versus really trying to shine brightly with what you bring to the table. Now, a little different when it comes to a primary, I understand, because you're just trying to win it so that you can stay in it, right? But that's the kind of language that I would use, that language of manipulation. Does she think you're all fools, people, because I'm here to represent you and stay here? I live here. This district means a lot to me. Those kinds of things are the messaging recommendations I would make to those other primary candidates.
Is there anything you think she might make as an appeal to the fourth CD? Hey, you should vote for me. I mean, does it need to come down to, here are the things that I've accomplished, or just I'm a fighter, I've got the right principles, and you should elect me because I know how Congress works and I can keep fighting in there if you put me in the fourth?
Well, principles are an interesting thing because some people go really far with the ethics there. I don't know that she's speaking of ethics. What she can have going in her favor is how much does she want to appeal to keeping the seat, along the lines of a Republican who already has some experience, who knows how to do some of the things, some of the manipulations, some of the activities of D.C. So that's where, at a time when power in Congress, power in the U.S. Senate, is at different tipping points. So that's really the argument that she has, is to not let it just accidentally, go. We don't want it going to the Democrats. She could say something like that, as well as just her own credentials and experience.
Sure. Roshini Rajkumar joining us, host of the Crisis Files podcast and crisis strategist. I want to shift in to 2023. We are at the end of this year, and in Colorado, obviously, we have this big political story to round out the year, and that's certainly one for the record books. But across the country, we've had so much. I mean, we've got a war in Israel that launched in October when Hamas brutally attacked the Jewish state in the worst, most deadly attack against Jews since the Holocaust. We have the ongoing war in Ukraine, of Ukraine doing its best to push back against Putin, and there's a lot of politics around that. We have a southern border crisis that has deteriorated. There are so many things politically and otherwise to jump into. When you look back at 2023, Roshini, and especially the beginning of the year, if we can even remember that far back with everything that happens, what are one or two things that really stand out?
Well, first I'll give you the big headline. So 2023 was a year of some very sad deaths. Some people that have lived long lives. So we'll get into that in a second. But let's go back to January 2nd, 2023, when Damar Hamlin, a 25-year-old Buffalo Bill, collapses on the field. Fortunately for him, the medical team went into swift motion, got him the attention he needed, and what a miraculous recovery. But what part of that headline shows us, and another one I'll mention, is how much of a hold the NFL and sports and famous athletes have on Americans day to day. So that was definitely a gripping story. At the time, my cousin was in the front office with the Buffalo Bills, so my brother and I were texting him that evening, trying to get any of the behind the scenes that we could. It definitely was something that rocked that whole organization, rocked the NFL, and really many of us who are sports fans were following that story. So that was really huge. And luckily, Damar Hamlin was a healthy man, an athlete, and everything happened in the right order medically for him to survive that. The other real NFL headline to me involves entertainment, and that's the Taylor Swift, the Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce coupling, and just the popularity of them as a couple, how the numbers for the NFL went up for those KC games when Taylor Swift was in the audience. She becomes Person of the Year by Time Magazine, not only because of her relationship, but because of her huge Eras tour and like the huge the multiplier effect that tour had in all the cities economically. So entertainment, sports, they really have a hold in our country. And I think at a time when politicians are really letting us down, we sort of look to some of those happier stories, Jimmy.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you would highlight those two sports-related stories or sports-specific stories, although I say related because Taylor Swift, of course, is not a sports icon. Well, okay, now she's a sports icon. And in the pop culture, that's a big deal. Now, you mentioned the high-profile deaths by people who have lived long lives. I mean, Henry Kissinger comes to mind as but one example, dying at the age of 100. Tony Bennett, Jimmy Buffett in the music world passed away. Who are some of those standouts who died that you say, okay, these are some of the icons that we lost, and that's a big story?
Well, let's start with Sandra Day O'Connor. So I say this not only because I am a licensed attorney, but even as far, I've been licensed for, I don't know, I can't even remember now. In 1997, I got my license in Minnesota. And even at that time, in the mid to late 90s when I was in law school, Sandra Day O'Connor was thought of as this trailblazer. And that was still a time. Even now, it's like people don't realize, I think, if you're coming of age in the current age, what a big deal it was that she was named the first female Supreme Court justice in the United States. I mean, that was such a big deal. And she was this big motivator. She came from, your part of the country and was such a cowgirl in her heart. And she took that all the way to the Supreme Court. So her death was, I think, very just a time to reflect. That was one. And you mentioned some other big names in politics. I think another one, and it personally rocked me because I kind of, in my formative years after college, grew up with the show Friends when Matthew Perry died. That just was so surprising, even though it was no secret that he had addiction issues and major alcohol issues and drug issues. But, he was recovering, he was helping other people. But to have this icon that was so part of the culture of people of, kind of a certain age bracket, maybe spanning about 20 years.
Yeah.
I'm in that bracket. You can't really, how many times do I say things that I think were inspired by his quotes from the show that are just part of my own lexicon, right? So those are some of the big deaths. You mentioned a couple, but Sandra Day and Matthew Perry, for their own unique reasons, were really huge.
Real quick, because I'm just about out of time, as we look ahead to 2024, what do you think folks should be watching for in the new year, early on in the new year, not looking out per se to November?
Well, politics will definitely take a hold of our country. I have said this. I've said it on the Crisis Files, the episode that just dropped today, number 76, called Crystal Balls. I say one of the big headlines in 2024 will be the Hispanic vote and what kind of movement we see there and the Hispanic culture across entertainment and other fields. So to me, that's the big story of 2024. We do have to figure out what's happening in our country. The divisiveness is just terrible. And I really hope that we're going to see some voices of reason come about. So I hold some hope for 2024. And as I always say, not a matter of if but when. Crisis will rock your world.
Yes.
So we do want everyone to be preventing crisis in their own lives.
Yeah, and one thing I'm looking forward to early in 2024, being on the Crisis Files with you, Roshini Rajkumar. I'm very much looking forward to that. That'll be coming up soon in the next month. Happy New Year, folks. Check out the Crisis Files podcast on all the podcast platforms. Really appreciate it, Roshini, and we'll talk to you again in 2024.
Thanks, Jimmy. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you as well. We're going to take a break, finish up the hour. Jimmy in for George. That is Jimmy Sengenberger here on News Talk 710 KNUS.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em out shelves. Your clutter transformation experts create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em out shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today. Say goodbye.
Jimmy Sengenberger back with you. Gotta love that Sultans of Swing. As we continue, News Talk 710 KNUS in for George Brauchler. We are tight on time, but I want to squeeze in Bill and Parker, who's been patiently waiting as we've been discussing quite the news story of this week. It's been keeping the phones going on Lauren Boebert making the switch from CD3 and saying, you know what, I'm going to run for the 4th Congressional District now. Bill, good morning.
Hey, Jimmy. Morning, Jimmy.
Good morning. What's on your mind? We're tight in time.
Okay, well, first of all, that 4th CD is going to be Republican, and as has been noted, there's a lot of worthy people, Deb Flora, Ted Harvey, others who are from this district, have contributed both in government and in the private sector, and they deserve a chance. For them to, Deb Flora put her life on hold to go after this seat, and for this bull in the china shop to come in here is really unfair to her. But I would say if Lauren wants to help the GOP, she might consider going after Caraveo's seat, because that was a very tight seat, and Lauren, with all her accomplishments, could probably easily sweep that and make that an R from a D. Whereas all she's going to do here is make it from an R to another R. So there's no point in her running here.
So that's the thing, is this is a much more solidly Republican seat than CD8, and people on the right, Republicans, want to pick up CD8. It is possible to pick up the 8th Congressional District from Caraveo. That ain't going to happen if you have somebody who's a lightning rod like Lauren Boebert, but in the 4th Congressional District, that may be an appeal to some, is, we're going to have this lightning rod fighter who will be in Congress now representing the 4th. That's something that might be an appeal, but you're suggesting, nope, it's not. There are other good candidates.
She's just a street performance artist, a clickbait princess, and she's not an accomplished Republican. What can she do that Ted Harvey's not going to do, or Deb Flora? And by the way, here's another thing. Your congressional delegation should be run for Senate runs.
Yeah.
Okay.
I got to run, Bill. I'm sorry. We can hear the bumper music. I appreciate it. Is this an instance of Lauren Boebert trampling upon the other candidates in a way that ticks you off? 303-696-1971. Another hour up ahead. Jimmy and for George. Stay with us. Good morning, Jimmy Sengenberger here with you, filling out the year for George Brauchler, News Talk 710 KNUS. Final hour to go. Thanks for being along for the ride today and throughout the year here on 710 KNUS. We appreciate your loyal listenership. You're what makes this station work. Appreciate it so much, and I hope you'll tune in as well tomorrow for the Jimmy Sengenberger Show. From 6 until 9, we will get to my program and what we have in store tomorrow here in just a bit. But I want to get to some texts. We've had a bunch of texts that have been coming in throughout the program, particularly regarding the Lauren Boebert story. Now, what's curious to me is about this, how passionate people are about one way or the other, whether you are really excited and enthused about Boebert making the switch from the 3rd Congressional District, where she will still represent to fill out her term, to run for the 4th Congressional District, because it is far more politically advantageous for her to make that switch. And not only that, it helps to ensure that Republicans will maintain the 3rd CD. Now, this is really interesting when you see the feedback and the opinions on either side, and you have to keep something in mind. Well, you may hear a lot of folks say, I don't like this idea. I don't want her. She's coming into a district she shouldn't represent. She's a carpetbagger. She's this and that. Whatever argument you want to throw against Boebert for those who are opposed to her moving in here. Remember this. In a race that has, I don't know, like 5 or 6 different people now, maybe more, you only need a plurality. You only need more than everybody else. You do not need 51%. So if Boebert has 20% support and the field remains the way that it is, it's very likely that she'll just secure the nomination and then pretty easily cruise on into a general election victory. Not guaranteed, but almost guaranteed, in the sense that this is the most solidly Republican district in the state. And so if she has a crowded field, helps to pave the way more toward a victory, unless some candidates start dropping out. And of course, that's difficult to see. It's difficult for candidates to say, you know what, I'm going to give up my run because we need to defeat Lauren Boebert. Is that really going to be the driving force for anybody to get out? Oh, I want somebody else to beat Boebert? Hard to see that. Our telephone number, of course, 303-696-1971. Bredman and Littleton. The Boebert issue illustrates the problem with government. It's a clown show at all levels, administered by bureaucrats to steal our treasure and blood, not what the founders intended. Another text, wouldn't it be nice if Republicans spent more time attacking Democrats than other Republicans? That came at a time where we were coming from the break, into a break. After I talked about this, this absolutely asinine email. That's what it is. It is a dumb email from Rhino Watch Colorado, which is the arbiter of who is or is not a true Republican. You might end up on their Rhino Wall of Shame. I wonder if Lauren Boebert could end up there, because supposedly she's empowering the enemy, a.k.a. the uniparty rhinos. They put out an email this morning. Boebert surrenders CD3 to the enemy is the headline of the email, the subject. And the text says, Representative Lauren Boebert disappoints with the announcement that she will abandon her CD3 constituents and seek the GOP nomination in CD4. It's a self-serving bid to hold on to political power. Boebert has her issues, but at least she's an America First candidate. And here's the stupidity kicker. Her move guarantees CD3 will now go to a Democrat or a unit-party Republican in name only. Keep in mind, folks, if a Republican loses CD3, whether that is Lauren Boebert or it's Jeff Hurd or whomever, if the Democrat wins, not the Republican, the Democrat wins, that's one fewer seat to keep Mike Johnson as Speaker and Jim Jordan as Judiciary Committee Chairman. It is ludicrous. It is stupid to be saying that Lauren Boebert is helping the enemy because now you might have a Republican that you're not a big fan of in that position. It makes no sense. Maybe somebody disagrees with me and agrees with Rhino Watch Colorado. 303-696-1971 is our telephone number. Good point here now that I think about it. Lori and Greeley, thank you for the text, because this puts into perspective, you don't just need 21%. That's when you actually get to the primary. In the assembly, it's a little different. Candidates need 30% at assembly. With the large number of candidates, I think they should be thinking about the petition route too. That's a good point. Will Lauren Boebert be able to secure what she needs at the CD4 assembly? That is a big question here. And a good point to put that into perspective, you got to get on the ballot first. You got to get 30% at the assembly. And then if you go the assembly route, that works out great. Then you can go into the ballot, and then you just need a plurality of the votes. 303-696-1971. Let's go to Jack in Evergreen. Good morning, Jack. You're on with Jimmy in for George.
Yeah, I'm not out of Colorado yet. But anyway, I agree with what she's doing 100%. I understand why some people's feathers are ruffled by it.
Sure.
But they're not looking at it strategically. And Deborah Flora, I just adore. I think she's wonderful. But here's the key point, that's most important thing. Boebert has proven herself to be an in-your-face fighter. We don't need any more move along, get along, Dick Wadhams type Republicans. Those people have destroyed us. They should be tarred and feathered. The fact that Lauren Boebert has shown herself to be a fighter. Now, when you get in this position, it's not a local position. It's a position that has national implications. There's never been a time when we need the House of Representatives to have more backbone than we need right now. We're guaranteed that with Boebert. We don't know with the rest of them. Now, they keep talking about they want somebody that's a citizen of the Eastern Plains. Well, how about Mark Hillman? I mean, he was in government office, and he's as conservative as they get, and he's third-generation farmer from Burlington, Colorado. I mean, there's all kinds of answers to all these questions. But the seat that she's vacating on the Western Slope will be filled by a Republican more than likely. And we're guaranteed we're not going to have if she gets in the fourth, we're guaranteed we're not going to have a wishy-washy rhino Republican.
So,
we're going to have a fighter.
Do you worry at all, because this is one of the claims for those who oppose Boebert, generally speaking, whether it's in CD3 or CD4, they say she is a lightning rod herself. It's not that she's a fighter. It's that she sucks up all this attention that's about her and her personal behavior and so on and so forth. Do you dismiss that? Is that something you find to be a non sequitur?
My primary point, and I know I'm repeating myself, but we don't need any more lay-down Republicans. We need fighters, period.
Right, but is there a difference between being a fighter and being somebody who gets attention because of your own antics? Because that's what opponents of Boebert would say.
I don't, that's a non sequitur to answer your question directly, yes.
Okay.
Jack? The fighting is what's important.
All right, well, we shall see what happens. A little bit of support there for Boebert's move. Thank you for the call, and Happy New Year. Let's go next to Jenny in, it looks like, Everett, Washington. Is that right, or have you moved to Colorado and your city said something else? There you go. I had a feeling. Where are you from, Jenny?
I'm a defector. I'm Highlands Ranch.
All right. Wonderful. So you're in CD4. What do you make of it?
So I kind of giggled when Lauren Boebert made the announcement because I'm a huge Deborah Flora fan. She's the one to represent us. And I think Boebert will take votes away from Ted Harvey. And I am so happy about that. Talk about wanting power. He's the guy that just wants power. Deborah Flora wants to represent us.
So let me ask you this question, though, because until now, Deborah Flora was the only woman in the primary. That means she had that sort of appeal of being a mother and being somebody very attuned to education for that reason, so on and so forth. She had that lane. That lane is gone. Does this not take away votes from those who might have been looking at her as like she can win as a suburban mom? Not Republicans don't look and say we want a woman. Republicans look and might say she can be an appealing person in this, like a Deborah Flora, in this race for that reason as a suburban mom.
No one.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no one holds a candle for me to Deborah Flora, and I don't think it matters to me as a voter if you're a man or a woman or if another woman's in the game, because Deborah Flora represents me as a conservative and as someone who will fight for education, which we really, really need now.
Hey, Jenny, I appreciate the call and the passion. Thank you. Happy New Year.
Yep, Happy New Year.
303-696-1971. Text coming in. Go, Lauren. Get another good Republican to run for District 3. On the other hand, you have Joe in Golden just now texting in saying Lauren is a loudmouth, boisterous moron and embarrassment to Colorado. People have passion one way or the other. You love her or you hate her. There's not really much of a middle ground when it comes to Lauren Boebert. At least that's what it seems to be like. And the question is, how does that help or hurt her in a primary? Let's go to Frank up next. Frank, you're on with Jimmy and for George. Good morning.
You know, Jimmy, thank you for what you do. I agree with Jack. I think Lauren has got a voice that's established. I think she states her case well. I was listening to her with George. She espouses her positions. I think Republicans have got to give up this whiny kind of attitude and go for strategery and tactics more if we're ever going to grow the House, because we're just barely hanging on now. I think she's an established commodity. I overlook some of the things that she has done, but I think her heart's in the right place, and I support her. I think the other candidates in CD4 are good candidates. I, too, love Deborah, but Lauren really gets out there and puts her point out there the way she stood up to the guy that wanted to say, I want to take all your guns, and she goes, heck, no, you're not. You know, there's no misunderstanding about where she comes from. And so this is a tactical move that I think is a wise move. I don't know if she'll win it or not, but I think she obviously has her credentials from the country, the farm area, and she seems to have represented her area well. But if you're an army and you got this overwhelming force that you're facing and you may be annihilated, it's far better to retreat and fight another day. And I think that's all she's doing against all this dark money that's coming from the Aspen area. And you're right, the other candidate may well win, that if she leaves, may well win on his own right, being a conservative, if that's what that CD3 truly is.
You know, one thing that I think some folks are wondering who are supporters, like the last caller, of current candidates who've already been announced and in this race who are from the 4th Congressional District is the question of why is this necessary? We have other solid conservatives who are running. You have the likes of Deborah Flora, for example, running in this primary. We don't need a Lauren Boebert in this winnable district. We can go from on the inside. What do you make of that argument?
I think Deborah is obviously a strong candidate who also espouses her position well, but in a softer manner. The question is, as far as the Republicans as a body, who will be more effective? Who will go out there and state a position in an emphatic way? And we need a few of those. And Lauren may be a spark plug. Some people would call her a lightning rod, but she's not in the sense of the Lady Green from Atlanta. She's more common sense, and her passion and sincerity comes across, I think. And Republicans definitely need to quit fighting among themselves and get together on some tactics and strategy here to not
So-
only maintain the House, but
Yeah.
grow the House.
Well, Frank, you're right in terms of Republicans needing to get it together and work together and so forth. But here's the thing. This is a primary, so you are determining which Republican should represent you, and there ain't going to be much cooperation in that regard for the time being because these candidates, however many end up in the race, all want the same thing, which is to be the one and only representative for the 4th Congressional District. Makes things a little bit more challenging as far as a unity discussion for the time being, does it not?
The only other one in that CD4 race that had announced that I see anywhere close to the passion of Boebert about this country is Deb. And the other guys, while good guys, smart guys, I just don't see their passion. I'm afraid they're kind of a typical Republican, go along to get along, speak your piece, but not be willing to get out there and fight and put yourself out there. And by golly, we need that.
It'll be fascinating. Hey, Frank, thanks for the call, and Happy New Year. Our telephone number, 303-696-1971. 3 mayors walk into a Zoom press conference. Sounds like the start of a joke, but when you hear this part, it isn't so much of a joke. 3 sanctuary city mayors walk into a Zoom press conference about illegal immigration. That literally happened yesterday as Denver's mayor, as well as the mayors of Chicago and New York City, got together for a press conference on that exact topic. We're going to talk about that on the other side and hear a little bit of sound of what they were saying. But first, as we go to a break, tomorrow on the Jimmy Sengenberger Show, I have a very special opening for the program when I will be joined in studio by Biff Gore, the ambassador of soul. He was on season 6 of The Voice. He's tremendous. You might have seen him at political events. You might have heard him on my programs before. An absolute blast. Of course, I play harmonica. So he came in the other day. We recorded the beginning of the show, and it was a blast for conversation and musical jams. And I want to give you a taste of what's coming up beginning at 6 a.m. tomorrow on the Jimmy Sengenberger Show. Let's go to a break with a little tune here. This is Signed, Sealed, and Delivered. Biff Gore joining me on the Jimmy Sengenberger Show tomorrow morning. Take a listen, and we'll be back. Jimmy in for George, News Talk 710 KNUS.
Like a fool, I went and stayed too long. Now I'm wondering if your love's still strong. Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Then that time I went and said goodbye. Now I'm back and not ashamed to cry. Ooh, baby, here I am, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Here I am, baby. Whoa, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. Here I am, baby. Whoa, signed, sealed, delivered. I'm yours. I've done a lot of foolish things that I really didn't mean. Whoa.
28 minutes before 10 o'clock, Jimmy Sengenberger here with you. It is the final hour of the George Show for 2023, but we still got some live and local weekend talk coming up. The Jimmy Sengenberger Show is tomorrow, as it is every Saturday from 6 to 9. News Talk 710 KNUS, and then you got Peter Boyles, and it continues. So be sure to tune in throughout the weekend, 710 KNUS, to close out the new year. Randy Corcoran Saturday night, Matt Dunn with Backbone Radio on Sunday night. You know, it almost sounds like a joke. 3 sanctuary city mayors walk into a Zoom press conference on illegal immigration. It sounds like the beginnings of a joke, doesn't it? Because we're talking about sanctuary cities, and you had yesterday 3 mayors. The mayor of Denver, of course, Mike Johnston, the mayor of New York City, Eric Adams, and the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. Adams, Johnson, and Johnston all getting together. And they were crying foul. This immigration issue has to be handled. And I'm sitting there reading these stories and seeing what they were saying and going, okay, I get that you're upset about Texas bringing all these illegal immigrants, these migrants up from the southern border into your cities. I'm not happy about that at all, especially as an advocate for securing our southern border and somebody who's concerned about issues like fentanyl and other concerns of what's happening from those coming across the border and things coming across the border. But here we have mayors from cities that are sanctuary cities now complain. It's the irony of it all, and yet they do not seem to recognize the irony. Here is a little bit from national NBC News about these 3 mayors.
Earlier this week, hundreds of asylum seekers were flown to the Northeast, forced to stop in Philadelphia due to bad weather. On Wednesday, Secretary of State Antony Blinken visiting Mexico, meeting with the president there to discuss the historic levels of migration. A source familiar with the talks says the U.S. is hoping to find ways to convince Mexico to do more, to ramp up immigration enforcement on its side of the border, and discuss incentives to encourage people to stay in Mexico rather than cross into the U.S.
Huh. There you go. Well, okay. So it gets even more. So they had a lot. It was like 40 minutes almost of this press conference. And then the mayor of Denver, Mike Johnston, gets a little extra attention over on with ABC News. And he talks about the plight of Denver specifically. And there are a couple of interesting tidbits. One, he talks about how Denver is ground zero here.
Yeah, right now, Denver is ground zero because we are the single largest recipient of migrants per capita of any city in America. Actually, more than twice as many migrants are coming to Denver as any other city. And that is, I think, a reason why the system currently isn't working. That's simply because we're the first big city north of El Paso. And so you put folks on a bus from El Paso, they go straight north on I-25, they end up in Denver. The good news is we know this is a solvable problem. We know how to solve the problem, but we know that what's currently happening is not working. The images you saw, what happens currently is about 10,000 people or so are contacted a day. They're apprehended. They're then released into the country, many of them on asylum claims. But when they arrive to Denver, it might take 3 or 4 years till that asylum case can get heard. And in the meantime, they don't have the ability to work. They don't have federal resources, and we don't have a plan for coordinated entry of these asylum seekers across the country. And that's really what we want the federal government to do, because we know there is a way to solve this. We did it with asylees from Afghanistan. We did it with asylees from Ukraine. The country can respond in a coordinated way, and we want to see America rise to this moment and do that here as well.
I just don't know. Here he's comparing to Ukraine as an example, a few different countries. Those are much more narrow, smaller numbers of people. You're not talking about them coming in through the southern border. They're able to get across. I mean, they were flown, that sort of thing in these particular cases that he's citing in much smaller numbers. This is much bigger and much more dramatic, and he really is emphasizing the point of work authorizations.
I mean, the top priority really, DeMarco, is work authorization. What I find every day I talk to migrants in the city, they'll say, I only want one thing, Mr. Mayor, I just want a job. I'll also get calls every day from employers who say, we have open jobs. We'd love to hire those people. Can we please hire them? Right now, we have folks who want to work and employers who want to hire them, and a federal government standing in the way that says that they can't. If we can get those folks expedited work authorization, they can support themselves, which is what they want to do most. And also, once we have that work authorization, then it's much easier for us to partner with other cities and states to say, okay, can Toledo take 500 people? Can Colorado Springs take 200? Can Cheyenne take 100? If folks arrive with the capacity to work, then we can coordinate their entry and coordinate their supports. Again, that's what we've done with other refugees, and it's been very effective.
So here's a question. Does Johnston make a reasonable case for providing work authorizations? And here's why this is not something to just brush off. Now, I'm not saying that I agree with it, but I think that there is a point, and I don't, but there is a point to be raised here. And that is, the asylum system and the general immigration system is not going to process these people for a long time. They come into the country across the southern border. They get into whatever state, city they're going to. If they get caught, that's a big if, but if they get caught or if they turn themselves in because they want to seek asylum, they will be released. Johnston said this. They will be released back out into society pending a hearing, pending a process, and that could take months, even years. Meanwhile, they're here. What are they supposed to do? They can't legally work. They can't legally drive. They can't legally do so many of these different things. And yet they're here. They can't make money then legally to live their lives. So they're living out on the streets. They're doing the route of taking hotel rooms or what have you. So you have all these people who are depending upon we, the taxpayers, for support. And they can't work for themselves. He's making a point, and I do think that it is a compelling argument. We need them to be able to take care of themselves. That's why we need work authorization. But then, of course, you have to say, well, we have all of these illegal immigrants who have been here for years, who don't have work authorizations, who have been denied the legal opportunity to work. And now you're saying, let's give work authorizations to this influx of people who just came across the border? At this point, you get into a discussion of, oh, well, let's essentially do amnesty. Perhaps, because you have people who've been here for a long time. What are you going to do about it? Is this a compelling argument sufficient to say, yeah, we actually do need to put in work authorization? Or is that going to worsen the crisis by passing along even more rumors of job opportunities? Only this time it's more correct than false. Because they're being sold a bill of goods. I've talked with 6th Congressional District candidate John Fabricatore, of course, former ICE office director. And he has said, look, you have all of these people who are coming here saying, I'm expecting a job, I'm expecting health care, and I'm expecting housing. That's without it necessarily being true. Now will it get even worse if you actually make it true? You are starting to provide them with housing, with shelter. You start to provide them with a legal way to get jobs. This is only going to get worse. You need to lock down the southern border if you're going to entertain anything of this sort. Alexa texting in, our laws and processes are so broken. From an HR perspective, we have had to do E-Verify for decades. Now they just want to throw that away? Yeah, I think so. And a big reason, though, and this is the compelling point from Johnston's perspective, is, look, we can't do this without federal support. We don't have the resources. We need more of them. And therefore, it would be easier if we didn't have to provide for all of these migrants as much as we are.
We want to avoid having to make those hard trade-offs, and we want the federal government to take action. If they don't, we'll be looking at a $160 million impact. That's 10% of our entire budget. So if you imagine cutting all of your city agencies by 10%, that would be historic cuts larger than we've seen even in the recession times of the 2009 and 2010 cycle.
That's a lot of money. that they are anticipating on. It's a money saver for taxpayers. Is it worth it to provide work authorization? 303-696-1971. Let's round out the segment with a couple of calls. First, let's go to Jim. Good morning, Jim. You're on with Jimmy in for George.
Good morning, Jimmy. Listen, that's just a non sequitur. The fact of the matter is if you go to any of the work sites, construction sites, probably half of the workforce is illegal. It's not a problem. They're just wanting them. You know what that would be doing? That would competing with these large corporations like Starbucks, McDonald's, and stuff like that. That would give them an entry for those type of jobs. If they really want a job, they can get a job anytime they want to. The fact of the matter is that's not a problem. The problem is all these people are going on to our medical system, and that is the state. We're paying for that. And at a certain point, there won't be enough providers to handle all these illegals and then pay for the people, the citizens. That's going to be the problem down the road.
Yeah, you're raising an important issue. Already we have illegal immigrants who are getting jobs. Here's the thing, though. We have a much greater influx. There are far many more that are here. Are there really enough jobs for all of those folks, whether legal or illegal?
No,
Legally or illegally, I mean.
Listen, you got legal citizens, and I know this for a fact, that are having to work 2 and 3 jobs of these jobs, like working at Starbucks, McDonald's, and stuff like that, just to live. And now you're bringing these people in, and they're going to compete, and they're going to drive prices down further, which means the citizen is going to be really pressed. We all know that when these people come in and we get an influx of them, the wages go down. The time they go up, if you recall, is when Trump put a stop to it. All of a sudden, all these low-earning people, their wages went up. Do you not see a correlation?
Yeah, one of the things, Jim, that I think we are seeing a lot more discussion of, though, is about the raising minimum wage and the challenges for employers in that regard, okay. But that's because Americans want more pay for their jobs. I don't know that you're seeing depressed wages. You're seeing increased in that, not necessarily to keep up with inflation, but you are seeing that there, with these cities that have growing minimum wages, you are seeing people taking those jobs. I don't know how much you necessarily have seen the depression in wages due to illegal immigrants taking jobs, especially when we're talking about a lot of jobs that they're not being hired for. You're not seeing illegals being hired for jobs at Starbucks or Dunkin' Donuts.
That's correct. I just said that. That's correct. They're not being hired. If we get worth authorizations, they're going to go for those jobs.
Yeah.
And then they're going to instead of those wages going up to what market value is, they'll stay at minimum wage.
Possibly. But is that necessarily a bad thing for employers to have more opportunity to lower their costs, though?
And the fact of the matter is, I think Starbucks needs to pay what the market allows. Walmart needs to pay what the market allows.
I think Starbucks pays a good bit for their starting wage. So I think that Starbucks maybe should be set aside in the discussion in that regard, Jim. But, the market's going to work as it's going to work. Are you mad about the market? Are you looking at it and saying, oh, these companies are just being corrupt, they're being boneheaded, and they're not doing right by Americans, and therefore we should actually have disdain for them if the opportunity presents itself for cheaper labor?
Okay, well, let's go to it. Okay, the reason why most things are being produced in China is because they pay the employees a very minimal amount of money, and they can. Do you want that here?
In this regard of having lower wages?
Yeah.
I mean,
exactly.
I want the market to work as it's going to work. I don't want the illegal immigrants to get these job opportunities. I don't want work authorization for them. I think that it provides more incentive for people to come across the border. But I'm just saying that, look, I mean, if this opportunity does become available to employers, you can't fault them for saying, okay, I'm going to go hire the work auth. But here's the thing, too. If they get work authorization, then they have to pay them whatever the minimum wage is. They still have to do that.
Correct. I'm just saying that these people, if an illegal is here, and that's what they are, illegal, they can find a job where there's not a problem to find a job. not in this market right
now. We do have, though, of course, this process of amnesty where if you, or rather asylum, if you claim asylum and say, hey, I should be here for this reason or that reason, and your asylum claim is eventually adjudicated and you're told, yes, you can stay, is that a different story?
Absolutely.
Okay. So, and of course, that could take some time. So in the interim, they're here, they're working, and then eventually they might get asylum approved.
Yeah, absolutely. The fact of the matter is our system is broken because these asylums take so long. But if our asylums were what they should be within 6 months of them entry, then things would work right. But the Democrats have purposely created the system. They think they're going to make these all voters, which they probably will in these Democratic areas. And, I just think what it does is it devalues American citizens.
Yeah.
And that's the unfortunate thing.
Okay.
American citizens are
Jim,
being devalued.
I got to run. I'm out of time. I appreciate the call. Great call. Thanks for the exchange. And you got a great name, by the way. 30369. Actually, we're going to be out of time. We'll try and squeeze Lewis and Aurora in on the other side. Jimmy Sengenberger in for George Brauchler. News Talk 710 KNUN.
Want to take your favorite radio station wherever you go? Well, now there's an app for that. No matter where you are, stream your favorite shows. Tap the app to listen to podcasts. Talk back to your favorite local hosts.
At the tone, leave a message.
Call the show. Set your alarm. Enter contests and win prizes, all in the palm of your hand. Available now for iOS and Android devices in the App Store or Google Play. And best of all, it's free. Download today.
Say goodbye to clutter and hello to convenience when you experience organization transformation in your home. Roll 'em Out Shelves, your clutter transformation experts, create affordable Colorado-crafted organized storage solutions. These custom options will maximize and organize your kitchen and bath storage as Roll 'em Out Shelves carefully designs and builds roll-out drawers to fit your space perfectly to clear the clutter. Contact owners Joyce and Brent at Roll 'em Out Shelves to schedule your free in-home estimate today.
Well, it was a massive word salad. I still don't understand what she was trying to say with that. Why she would have gone down that road, I don't know. Look, we're Republicans. The Republican Party was founded to oppose slavery and its expansion. And the reason slavery got abolished in the United States was because of the Republican Party.
That is quite a story. Nikki Haley stepping in it. It's disappointing. I like Haley a lot. I think she'd be a great nominee for the Republican Party. I think the same of Ron DeSantis. And yet she stepped in this story with the Civil War answer. Just not a good move. Good to be with you. Jimmy Sengenberger in for George Brauchler. Really quick, I got like 45 seconds. I want to squeeze in Lewis in Aurora, who has been patiently waiting. Good morning, Lewis. Happy New Year.
Hey, blessed New Year, brother. Listen, I got a lot to say about illegals, but I'm going to save that for another time. But I want to talk about the carpetbagger. Lauren, I like her, but she should not be going to the District 4. She should carpetbag down here and run against Jason Crow. I want Deborah Flora. Flora should have been our next senator. She would have beaten Michael Bennett, and she should have been our next senator. Let her be the next congressperson from District 4. Lauren, she ran away from District 3. She needs to come down and run against Jason Crow in my district, okay? I want, and anybody I know in District 4, I'm going to tell them, support Deborah.
Okay. All right, there we go. Lewis, Happy New Year, brother. Thanks for calling in throughout the year. We appreciate it.
All right, brother.
All right, that is it for me today. Happy New Year to you. Tomorrow morning, be sure to tune in 6 to 9 for the Jimmy Sengenberger Show. Special in-studio guest, Biff Gore, for a tremendous jam session and conversation. He was on Season 6 of The Voice. Got very far in that. He's a phenomenal guy as well, and you just got to tune in. I'm on the harmonica, he's on guitar and vocals. We heard a little bit of a tidbit, just a slight sample from earlier. I also encourage you, and I'm going to talk about this as well tomorrow morning, to check out my column at the Denver Gazette. 10 years later, I'm grateful I didn't jump. Talking about a very, overcoming mental illness on my part. 10 years ago this Sunday, I didn't take my own life. I'll talk about that story tomorrow on my show. Encourage you to read the column. Optimism for the new year. There's another side. You can do it. We can all do it. God bless America. God bless you. And Happy New Year.